LoveLore Library. Chapter 118. Mu Qingguo and guard Shengwan chased him to the edge of the cliff. Immediately, they saw a dense mass of black shadows in the forest in the north. It was like a black cloud. What was going on? The two of them were as confused as monks. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin's figure gradually disappear into the distance, the two of them hesitated. Should they chase or not? Unexpectedly, just as they were hesitating, the large oval-shaped black cloud in the north suddenly changed. It gradually elongated into a long strip, and showed signs of spreading towards the north. What was going on? Could it be that this poisonous miasma could change its shape? Even if it changed shape because of the wind, it couldn't change so quickly and so neatly. Moreover, the wind was blowing from the north. Strange. Young General, is this really poisonous miasma? Guard Shengwan felt that something was wrong no matter how he looked at it. Mu Qingguo stared closely at the black mist, only to see that the black mist was actually moving. From afar, it looked like a black satin under the sunlight, floating towards the north. Moreover, it was moving faster and faster. Even the stupidest person could tell that this was definitely not poisonous miasma. Chase! Mu Qingguo said as he leaped down and chased after it. Guard Shengwan couldn't care less and followed closely behind. At this moment, Long Fei Yi was very close to the strip-shaped mosquito swarm. He landed on a tree nearby and saw clearly that the poisonous mosquitoes seemed to be fighting for something in the air. As they fought to be the first to fly forward. If he chased in this direction, would he be able to catch up to Han Yunxi? Long Fei Yi didn't chase to the front. He followed behind the poisonous mosquito swarm from beginning to end. He knew that as long as he followed the swarm, he wouldn't lose sight of the person. Mosquitoes' sense of smell was much more sensitive than a human's. The poisonous mosquito swarm wasn't fast, so it wasn't difficult to keep up with them. About a mile ahead of the poisonous mosquito swarm, Qing Yi and Han Yunxi were running at full speed. The distance was a little far, and the poisonous mosquito swarm was silent. They did not notice anything strange behind them. First of all, she had to escape with all her might to ensure her safety. Second of all, His Highness had said to bring this woman to their hidden headquarters in Tianing country. As long as she took care of the matter, she could go back. She was also a spy. Her identity was sensitive and she carried a heavy responsibility. If she left for too long, it would arouse suspicion. Qing Yi's speed was unprecedentedly fast. However, not far behind her, a red shadow, like a sharp arrow, scuttled through the grass, following closely behind. After running for an unknown amount of time, the red figure suddenly stopped and hid behind a large tree. Who else could this person be other than Gu? Seeing that Qing Yi and the others had gone far away, he then stood up and raised his head to sniff the air. Then, he stretched out his hand and stopped against the wind for a moment. He put down his hand and sniffed his palm. He was stunned at first, but then he smiled. Poison lass, you're so capable. When those long and narrow eyes smiled, they were as beautiful as they could be. He looked back and licked his lips playfully. Then he turned and immediately chased after them. The poisonous mosquitoes and Qing Yi's group were separated by two large mountains. The mosquitoes chased while fighting for the medicinal powder in the air, so their speed was naturally not very fast. Moreover, Qing Yi's speed was very fast. By the next morning, the poisonous mosquitoes still had not caught up to the source of the medicinal powder, Han Yunxi's hand. There was even a mountain between them. At this time, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengwan had already caught up to Long Fei Yi. Your Highness, what's going on? Mu Qingguo asked seriously. He had a faint guess but didn't dare to confirm it. When Long Fei Yi explained the situation, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengwan were both dumbfounded. That means the assassin is right in front. Your Highness, why aren't we chasing? Guard Shangwan was very excited. This prince is very curious about where they want to take Han Yunshi. Long Fei Yi was very interested and not in a hurry. If he wanted to chase, he would have already saved Han Yunshi by now, right? If he didn't chase, he would be casting a long line to catch a big fish. When he said this, Mu Qingguo and Guard Shangwan immediately understood. However, Guard Shangwan was very puzzled. If His Highness Duke of Qin was really worried about esteemed Wang Fei, his first reaction would be to save her, right? But now, he was undoubtedly using esteemed Wang Fei as bait to directly attack the thieves' lair. If things went wrong, the bandits might even kill the hostage. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin's cold and resolute expression, Guard Shangwan was very sure that Mu Qingguo had made a mistake yesterday. Sacrificing a single Han Yunshi to uncover a nest of thieves was killing two birds with one stone for His Highness Duke of Qin. It was the best of both worlds. If Han Yunshi sacrificed herself in the line of duty, the Duke of Qin's estate would still have face. Since His Highness Duke of Qin had already said this, Mu Qingguo and Guard Shangwan didn't dare to urge him and could only follow closely behind. Tsing Yi and the others were in front, Gu was behind, the poisonous mosquito swarm was behind, and Long Fei Yi was at the back. This pursuit was like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Just who would become the oriole in the end? Time flowed by and soon, a few days had passed. As they got closer and closer, the amount of mosquito coil powder in the air also increased and the speed of the poisonous mosquito swarm gradually slowed down. Early this morning, Han Yunshi decisively stopped releasing the mosquito coil powder. Tsing Yi hadn't said a word along the way, but Han Yunshi could feel that they were about to reach their destination. She had attracted such a large poisonous mosquito swarm behind them for so many days. Could it be that no one had discovered the abnormality in the mountain forest? Or could it be that after the poisonous mosquito swarm exploded yesterday, the people searching the mountain all retreated and not a single one was left behind? So in the wilderness, no one had discovered the newly gathered poisonous mosquito swarm. Even if Mu Qingguo and Guard Shangwan were negligent, Long Fei Yi wouldn't give up so quickly. He should have thought that she had a way to make use of the poisonous mosquito swarm. Even if he didn't think of it, with his personality, he wouldn't retreat at the first obstacle, right? Or, that guy really didn't come. However, even if that guy really didn't come, the large number of poisonous mosquito swarm in the mountain forest had already dispersed. Mu Qingguo and Guard Shangwan should have sent people into the mountain to search a long time ago. Looking at the time, how could they have discovered the moving poisonous mosquito swarm by now? Why was it that after so many days, there was no movement behind them at all? Could it be that Mu Qingguo and the others had given up on the pursuit? Qin Wangfei being kidnapped was a big deal. Who could make Mu Qingguo and Guard Shangwan give up on the pursuit? Only Long Fei Yi. He didn't come himself. He didn't even care about her anymore. Was he using this opportunity to kill her? Thinking of this, Han Yunshi's originally spirited eyes gradually dimmed. She was stunned for a long, long time before the corners of her lips pulled up into a self-mocking smile. Long Fei Yi, on what basis did he come? On what basis did he save her? On such a cold day, he could just sit by the stove in the greenhouse and patiently wait for this bunch of robbers to come knocking on his door. Or, he could just let the robbers kill the hostage and not be threatened by the robbers. The Empress Dowager appointed the marriage and the Emperor forced the marriage. If there wasn't a very good reason, he couldn't divorce his wife. Even if she died, the Duke of Qin's manor had to give a reason that could convince everyone. This time, wasn't it the best time? Right at this time, Qing Yi suddenly landed on the ground without any warning. Han Yunshi's foot landed heavily on the ground. Her right foot that hadn't recovered yet was hit like this. The sudden pain in her ankle caused her nerves to tense up. With this pain, Han Yunxi's self-mocking smile turned into a light laugh. That guy had just rubbed her foot a few times. How could she forget her awkward status and treat herself as someone important? What Nan Shan read. What are you laughing at? Qing Yi asked cautiously. Han Yunxi glanced at her. Her smile turned cold and she didn't answer. This woman's smile was filled with determination and a ruthlessness that even men couldn't compare to. It made Qing Yi fearful for no reason. She grabbed Han Yunxi's collar. What are you laughing at? Qing Yi, after being silent for so many days, finally spoke. Han Yunxi looked at her coldly. The smile on her lips deepened, but she didn't speak. Qing Yi was even more anxious. She grabbed her collar and fiercely pushed. Speak, what are you laughing at? Who knew that at this time, a sharp and gloomy voice suddenly came from behind. Qing Yi, you stupid woman. You're being followed. Qing Yi was stunned. She immediately turned her head to look. She saw that a black-clothed man had appeared behind her. His figure was tall and stalwart. His wide black cloak fluttered in the wind. He wore a green mask with fangs on his face. Only his mouth was exposed. His gaze was so fierce that it was enough to make people ignore his terrifying mask and only focus on his eyes. Lord! Qing Yi blurted out. Lord! Han Yunxi's heart jumped. She knew that the masked black-clothed man in front of her must be the leader of the northernly country spies. He was also the poison master that she had always been curious about. Suddenly, the masked black-clothed man approached. His mysterious black, fiendish eyes stared straight at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was shocked. She subconsciously wanted to retreat. Only then did she realize that she was restrained by Qing Yi and couldn't move. You're the one who released the mosquito coils, right? The black-clothed man asked. His voice was so low that it sounded like it came from the depths of hell. Han Yunxi couldn't help but shiver. However, although she was afraid, she was more concerned about the words he just said. He said that Qing Yi was being followed. Could it be that someone really chased after the poisonous mosquito swarm? Who could it be? Seeing that Han Yunxi didn't answer, the masked black-clothed man suddenly lifted her chin. That strength wasn't at all tender and protective of the fairer sex. Han Yunxi only felt that her chin was about to break. Answer this lord's question. His voice was filled with killing intent. Qing Yi at the side was scared. Who knew? Han Yunxi fiercely tilted her chin and said coldly, so what if I am? The masked black-clothed man's hand was clearly a bit stiff. He was just about to get angry. Who knew? Han Yunxi said coldly, the contest between you and Long Fei Yi is based on your own ability. Kidnapping a weak woman like me to threaten others, aren't you ashamed? How dare you? Qing Yi shouted angrily and raised her hand to slap. No one had ever dared to be so impudent to his honor. However, the masked black-clothed man casually flung Qing Yi away and said coldly, useless thing, you can get lost. As he said, he pulled with his big hand and actually forcibly pulled Han Yunxi from Qing Yi's hand into his embrace. Han Yunxi's face heavily hit his chest. Her facial features were in so much pain that she wanted to cry. This embrace was filled with a domineering masculine aura. It was so unfamiliar that it was scary. Han Yunxi angrily raised her head and roared, let go of me. However, the masked black-clothed man smiled coldly, Han Yunxi, you're mistaken. This lord didn't intend to threaten Long Fei Yi by kidnapping you. This lord only wants you, that's all. Only wants me, that's all. She didn't know what he meant by this sentence. However, from his pair of eyes that were as dark as midnight, Han Yunxi clearly saw a strong possessiveness. She was really scared. Chapter 119. Han Yunxi was scared, and without thinking, she bit down ferociously on the masked black-clothed man's hand. Seeing this, Qing Yi and the other black-clothed assassins were all stupefied. Although his lord admired Han Yunxi's poison skills and had the intention to nurture Han Yunxi into a capable assassin, but for Han Yunxi to be so presumptuous, there was only death awaiting her. What his honor likes is obedience, absolute obedience. Under everyone's shock, this moment seemed to have frozen, and time seemed to have stopped. Let go. A low and deep voice descended from the sky, concealing the silence before the storm. However, Han Yunxi pretended as if she didn't hear anything and bit down with all her might, hoping that the other party would let go of her. An intense pain came, and a hint of surprise flashed past the masked black-clothed man's eyes. The anger in his eyes actually dissipated, and what replaced it was a playful look that he had never had before. Han Yunxi, are you poisoning me? What kind of poison is this? He actually only noticed it now. Han Yunxi's teeth slightly stiffened, then she immediately let go, raised her head, looked at the masked black-clothed man and admitted, yes, furthermore, you have already been poisoned. Once these words came out, the masked black-clothed man immediately laughed out loud. Good. Very good. He was indeed poisoned, and this was the first time that someone was able to poison him. Is it very funny? Han Yunxi said coldly. The poison that she used was a poison that only existed in the modern era, vitamin poison, which was a highly concentrated vitamin. Vitamin was a good thing, but once it was overdosed, it would cause acute poisoning. In light cases, the body's functions would be damaged, and in heavy cases, death. Vitamins naturally existed in ancient plants, but there was no way to extract large amounts of them and make them into poison. Without poison, it also meant that there was no antidote. No matter how powerful this fellow's poison skills were, once he was poisoned, he would be helpless. Right now, he still didn't feel anything, but, after a while, he would definitely be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Han Yunxi, I am getting more and more interested in you. As the masked black-clothed man said, he raised his hand and actually casually kissed away the blood on the back of his hand. I will bring you back and slowly detoxify you. As he spoke, he grabbed Han Yunxi's waist and carried her over his shoulder. Then, he turned around and left. Han Yunxi kicked and punched him. Let go of me. I'm the only one who can cure your poison. Let me go if you don't want to die. Within an hour, you will definitely die from the poison. You don't know what kind of poison you have, do you? No matter how much Han Yunxi struggled, the masked man still held her captive. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a red shadow suddenly flashed and landed in front of the masked man. He stood in the air, his wide and luxurious red robe fluttering in the wind, like a ball of scorching fire burning in the air. He was like an immortal, like a demon, like a dream, like an illusion. So beautiful. This was Han Yunxi's first thought. When the masked man said that he was being followed, was he referring to this guy? Red Shadow, is he Gu? Just as Han Yunxi was filled with suspicion, Gu teased, Poison lass, did you miss me? It really was him. Han Yunxi was overjoyed. She did not expect this guy to be even more beautiful than she had imagined. Who are you? The masked man asked coldly. He could tell that this person's martial arts was not low. He knew that Long Fei Ye's men were following behind the poisonous mosquito swarm, but he did not notice the existence of this red-clothed man. Brother, it's not good to bully a weak girl like this, right? Gu smiled with a devastatingly beautiful smile. What does it have to do with you? The masked man was high and mighty, full of disdain. Unexpectedly, the otherworldly, elegant, and noble Gu suddenly burst out with vulgarities. It has nothing to do with me, but it's a pity that I don't like you. Courting death. The masked man carried Han Yunxi with one hand and lightly waved his other hand. Then, several darts were shot out. Do. Han Yunxi's detoxification system immediately alerted her that there was poison. Poison. It's snake powder. Han Yunxi exclaimed. These darts were just a cover. When the darts were shot out, the air was filled with poisonous snake powder. Once inhaled, one would be poisoned. This method of poisoning was the most difficult to guard against. The masked man was very surprised that Han Yunxi could see through his poison at a glance. However, Gu chuckled. Poison lass, don't worry. I'm not afraid. Gu held his breath. Then, he pulled out a blood-red whip from his waist and fiercely swung it over. Do. The detoxification system immediately alerted her that there was poison. Moreover, the method of poisoning was the same as the masked man. When the whip was swung out, the poison was also scattered in the air. No wonder Gu was not afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes. It turned out that he was also a poison expert. Han Yunxi was also speechless. How did she meet so many poison experts all of a sudden? One must know that when a poison expert met a poison expert, poison attacks were ineffective. It was a competition of true ability. Child's play. The masked man was very disdainful. He did not dodge the whip. Instead, he suddenly put Han Yunxi down and pushed her to block the whip. Han Yunxi did not expect this and screamed. Gu had no choice but to change his direction and swung the whip to one side. Seeing this, the masked man pulled Han Yunxi back and tied her up in his arms. You're not a man. Han Yunxi scolded angrily. The masked man sneered. Don't worry. He won't dare to hurt you. You. Han Yunxi was furious. However, Gu was still smiling. He was not angry. After he withdrew the whip, he did not stop. Then, he swung the whip again. This time, the masked man used Han Yunxi to block the whip again. However, unexpectedly, Gu did not withdraw the whip this time. Swoosh! He whipped Han Yunxi's arm fiercely. Ah! Han Yunxi screamed. She was in so much pain that her internal organs were all shattered. The masked man was surprised as well and gave a start. At the same time, Gu Qishao's whip lashed out again, heading straight for the masked man's mask. At this critical moment, the masked man who did not expect this to happen suddenly retreated. He subconsciously let go of Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi immediately fell down. However, Gu swung the whip again and wrapped it around Han Yunxi. He wanted to pull her over. At this moment, Tsing Yi and a few masked assassins in black held their swords and attacked Gu. The assassins surrounded Gu. Tsing Yi swung her sword at the long whip. Gu's always smiling peach blossom eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. He did not pull Han Yunxi anymore. Instead, he instantly closed in. As he withdrew the long whip, he grabbed Han Yunxi's waist. Qingyi's sword missed its target, but at the same time, multiple hidden darts flew in its direction. They weren't aimed at Gu Qishao, but Han Yunxi. You better protect her. The masked man warned as he threw out countless darts. Do. Han Yunxi's detoxification system frantically reminded her. God knows how many poisons were hidden in these darts. Although she was not afraid of poison, there were so many darts that it was impossible to guard against. Gu was one against many and could only protect Han Yunxi as he dodged. Han Yunxi was tightly protected in his arms. She wanted to help but could not. Very quickly, Gu's shoulder was hit by 3 darts. He frowned, feeling that the pain was very strange. However, he did not have time to think about it. Even if he was poisoned, he had to endure it for a while. He endured the pain and swept the long whip to drive Tsing-yi and the rest back. Taking this opportunity, he immediately fled to the forest behind him. The poisonous mosquito swarm was behind him. Long Fei-yi must also be behind him. It was not worth it to fight against so many. He had to ask for help. Seeing that he was about to leave, the masked man's lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile. The game is over. After saying that, he clenched his fist. Suddenly, Gu felt something tugging on his shoulder. He subconsciously turned his head to look. Only then did he realize that the 3 darts that were deeply embedded in his shoulder were actually connected by 3 threads as thin as spider silk. These were spider darts. The other end of the spider silk was in the masked man's hand. And this end of the spider silk had already been deeply embedded in his body along with the poison. Who was this masked man? He actually had such a top-grade poison weapon. Han Yunxi was also shocked. This was the first time she had seen such a thing. She pulled out the dagger that she had brought along and wanted to cut off those 3 threads of spider silk. But after a few slashes, the thin spider silk actually did not break. What should she do? Han Yunxi couldn't care so much as she stretched out her hand to grab the darts. Who knew that once the darts were pulled out, blood spurted out from Gu's shoulder. What was even more unbelievable was that the spider silk was not pulled out. It was as if it had been implanted into Gu's body. Han Yunxi did not believe in heresy as she used all her strength to pull out the spider silk. At this moment, Gu frowned and said in a deep voice, "Let go. This is poison and it has affected the heart." Once these words were said, Han Yunxi gave a cold humph and immediately let go. Heavens, she had never seen this kind of poison before. Never seen it before, how was she going to detoxify it? And it had gone deep into the heart. If she hurriedly detoxified the poison, Gu would die. She activated the detoxification system to do a deep scan but only found out that Gu's heart had been poisoned by a type of spider poison. But as for what kind of poison it was, the detoxification system could not scan it. The modern poison that she had given the masked man had not even taken effect yet, and the masked man had actually given him a poison that she could not detoxify. Damn it! Han Yunxi suddenly realized that she had underestimated this mastermind behind the scenes. Just as Gu and Han Yunxi were helpless, suddenly, the masked man pulled Gu and Han Yunxi out together. It's over. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a large swarm of poisonous mosquitoes suddenly surged out from the forest and swarmed towards Han Yunxi and Gu. Han Yunxi's hand still had the scent of the mosquito coil. The poisonous mosquitoes had arrived. Controlling the poisonous mosquitoes was the assassin's specialty. Logically, the masked man should be happy, but who knew that he was anxious? He pulled the spider silk fiercely as if he was afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes. Unfortunately, his speed was not as fast as the poisonous mosquitoes. Han Yunxi had stopped releasing the mosquito coil for a long time. Now, only the scent remained on her hand. The poisonous mosquitoes seemed to have smelled the scent of their favorite blood and swarmed towards Han Yunxi crazily. Han Yunxi had forgotten about the poisonous mosquitoes. Seeing this, she immediately activated the detoxification system to release the mosquito coil. If there was no mosquito coil, her hand would become the target of public criticism. Just thinking about it was terrifying. Just as Han Yunxi released the mosquito coil, the dense poisonous mosquitoes instantly enveloped her and Gu. At the same time, they were less than 10 steps away from the masked man. The masked man was still pulling with all his might, but suddenly, Gu's shoulder loosened. The spider silk broke. What happened? Chapter 120. It wasn't only Gu Qishao who sensed the snapping of the strands, but Han Yunxi as well. How could this be? Could it be, the poisonous mosquitoes are the natural enemies of this spider silk? Every poison has its own nemesis. Gu Qishao chuckled and hugged Han Yunxi tightly. Then he turned around in the midst of the mosquito swarm and scattered some sort of poison. In a flash, all of the mosquitoes fled in panic, many of them dying and crashing to the ground. Han Yunxi's detoxification system beeped incessantly. Some reminded her of the poisonous mosquitoes, some reminded her of the poison of the spider darts, and some reminded her that the thing Gu scattered was poisonous. Gu, the reason why this guy wasn't afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes was because he was proficient in fighting poison with poison. Fighting poison with poison, that was quite impressive. When the poisonous mosquitoes scattered, Gu continued to flee forward with Han Yunxi. The masked man, Tsing Yi, and the other assassins followed closely. Darts after darts came flying again. Compared to being bitten by the poisonous mosquitoes, Gu would rather spend more effort to dodge the darts of the masked man. As long as they could enter the forest, the darts would be obstructed and they could escape faster. Gu's speed was very fast. Han Yunxi nestled in his arms and could hear his strong and rapid heartbeat. She couldn't imagine that such a gentle and enchanting man's heartbeat could be so masculine. Gu's speed was already fast enough. However, the masked man was also terrifyingly fast. If they hadn't taken the initiative and escaped quickly, they would have been caught. Just as Gu was about to enter the forest, a dart suddenly flew past him and hit a tree trunk. It actually bounced back. What a powerful darting technique. This time, Gu hesitated for a moment and dodged sideways. One must know that in a battle between experts, victory or defeat was often due to a moment of carelessness. It wasn't a matter of strength. While Gu Qishao was lost in thought, the masked man chased after him and grabbed Han Yunxi's arm. Gu Qishao tightened his grip on Han Yunxi's waist and struck out with a palm. The masked man held on to Han Yunxi with one hand while raising his other to block. Han Yunxi hit the masked man's hand with all her might. She even bit down and released the poison. However, the poison didn't seem to have any effect on the masked man. God knows if he was a poison human, poison corpse, or poison parasite. Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about this problem. Her strength was obviously not as great as the masked man. She had an idea and pulled out her dagger to stab, but Qing Yi's long sword came slashing from the side. She was so scared that she immediately let go of her hand, and Qing Yi almost cut off her hand. So terrifying. The green-robed and black-robed assassins arrived one after another, leaving Gu Qishao once again outnumbered. He held on to Han Yunxi tightly with one hand and dealt with the masked man with the other. He couldn't care about Tsing Yi and the assassins. Tsing Yi's eyes flashed with malice. She turned her sword and stabbed towards Gu's eyes. Gu and the masked man were in a deadlock. Their strength was balanced. If he wanted to escape and dodge Tsing Yi's long sword, Gu could only let go of Han Yunxi. But as soon as he let go, Han Yunxi would fall into the masked man's hands. He'd only managed to snatch her away by a fluke, so it was impossible for him to snatch her away from the masked man again when he was outnumbered. What should he do? Tsing Yi's long sword was nearing. However, even at this juncture, Gu was still hesitating. Suddenly, Han Yunxi shouted, "Let go!" Then she twisted her body and broke free from Gu's hand and kicked him away. Just like that, Gu retreated as Tsing Yi's long sword pierced past his eyes. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi was pulled away by the masked man. Everything seemed to be over, but at the same time, there was a sharp sound of something breaking through the air. Whoosh! A sharp arrow pierced through the air and shot towards the masked man's arm. The arrow seemed to contain enough power to split the heavens and earth. It even caused the air around it to tremble violently. The arrow was as fast as lightning falling from the sky. Like a hot knife through butter, it could topple mountains and overturn seas. It was unstoppable. No one had expected this to happen. In a moment of desperation, the masked man decisively withdrew his hand. The sharp arrow brushed past the masked man's sleeve. Even if it didn't hit its target, the masked man was still repelled by the power contained in the arrow. Fine iron crossbow arrow. Tsing-yi cried out in alarm. Fine iron was the world's strongest metal. Only Tianning's imperial family possessed it, while the fine iron crossbow arrows were exclusive to Tianning's Duke of Qin. Long Fei-yi had come. Han Yunxi was free of her bindings and plummeted downwards. But when she heard this voice, she instinctively turned her head to look. She saw a tall, proud figure descend from the skies to land behind her. His aura was as noble as a god's, but his face was as calm as a demon's. One hand was behind his back while the other held a crossbow, aiming at the masked man. It's him. Long Fei-yi. He's come. He hadn't given up on her, nor had he disappointed her. He'd chased after the poison mosquito swarm. At this moment, Han Yunxi forgot about her own predicament. Even though she was plummeting, her heart was no longer afraid. Instead, she was inexplicably excited. It was as if this fellow's appearance meant she was safe. Long Fei-yi. The masked man breathed a sigh of relief. He'd been afraid of Long Fei-yi following them from behind, so he'd stepped forward to take Han Yunxi away. Who knew that Gu would interfere and delay things? He should have thought of this earlier. Once the poison mosquito swarm arrived, Long Fei-yi would also arrive. At this moment, the masked man was the closest to Han Yunxi. His ferocious eyes sunk as he ignored the warning of Long Fei-yi's fine iron crossbow and instantly rushed towards Han Yunxi. Swoosh! Another sharp sound pierced through the air. That fine iron crossbow arrow seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth as it flew down majestically. God knows how much internal energy Long Fei-yi had poured into this arrow. Everyone was shocked. But the masked man didn't give up. He chased after Han Yunxi while paying attention to the arrow. He was prepared to dodge it at any time. But what was even more unexpected was that once the fine iron crossbow arrow was shot, Long Fei-yi also flew down. His face was as cold as a god's. Seeing this, the masked man's eyes turned cold as he shot out a hidden dart. But he shot out a few more darts. His aim wasn't to hit Long Fei-yi but to poison him. One must know that Long Fei-yi's martial arts were exceptionally strong, but he didn't understand poison. Poison was his weak spot. It's poisonous. Han Yunxi cried out in alarm. At this moment, she was only 3 meters away from the ground. She could fall and shatter into pieces at any moment. The sharp arrow was right in front of the masked man. He had no choice but to dodge and missed the opportunity to grab Han Yunxi's hand. But the powder that he had scattered around Han Yunxi's surroundings. If he couldn't get it, he'd rather destroy it than let Long Fei-yi get it. If Long Fei-yi didn't stop and continued to fly down, he would definitely be poisoned. But who knew that Long Fei-yi didn't care about the poison in the air and flew down at a low altitude. Just as Han Yunxi was about to hit the ground, a strong and powerful arm scooped her up and pulled her into an embrace. Following that, his body spun and his feet landed firmly on the ground. That movement was indescribably elegant. Han Yunxi looked at his perfect and cold side profile. She actually hoped that this dangerous moment would never pass. Seeing that Long Fei-yi didn't care about the poison in the air and saved someone, the masked man was shocked. Could it be that Long Fei-yi wasn't afraid of the poison? At that moment, he couldn't care so much and shouted, "Retreat!" If Long Fei-yi didn't care about the poison, everyone present wouldn't be his match even if they worked together. They had to retreat. At this moment, Goose suddenly attacked Qin Yi. Seeing this, the masked man's figure flashed, pulled apart Qing Yi and threw a hidden dart at Gu. With the previous example, Gu was still somewhat afraid of this hidden dart. He dodged to the side several times. When he was about to give chase, the masked man had already taken Qing Yi and disappeared into the forest at the side. Gu didn't stay idle. With a wave of his long whip, he stopped the remaining assassins. At this moment, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengwan caught up and quickly joined in. Long Fei Yi didn't give chase. His gaze was locked on the masked man in the distance. When he couldn't see the man's back, his brows suddenly tightened and he spat out a mouthful of black blood. The masked man's poison powder didn't have any effect on Gu and Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was a poison master and didn't need to detoxify the poison immediately. Her immunity was also better than others, so the poison would take a longer time to act up. Gu was an expert in fighting poison with poison, so the poison powder probably wouldn't have any effect on him. However, Long Fei Yi was different. In just a short while, the poison had already acted up. The masked man had scattered too many poisons. Han Yunxi couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. "Let go of me, I'll quickly check," she said hurriedly. Panic was written all over her face, but she didn't even notice it. Long Fei Yi glanced at her flustered little face and didn't say much. He let go of her. Han Yunxi turned to face Long Fei Yi and immediately activated the detoxification system. This scan indicated that there were 3 types of poisons. That damned masked man. Could it be that the poisons in his darts were all different? Seeing the bloodstains on Long Fei Yi's lips, Han Yunxi didn't think much of it. She stood on her tiptoes and reached out her hand. Long Fei Yi pulled her back and said unhappily, "What are you doing?" He was very obsessed with cleanliness. Since he was young, he hated other people touching him, especially his face. "After collecting a blood sample for analysis, I'll be able to determine which of the 3 poisons you have." Han Yunxi was still anxious and didn't think too much about it. Long Fei Yi hesitated for a moment. He lowered his eyes and didn't look at her, but he still slowly let go of her hand. Han Yunxi's pale little face was filled with seriousness. She stood on her tiptoes again and reached out her index finger to gently touch the corner of Long Fei Yi's mouth. She gently wiped away some of the bloodstains. As if it wasn't enough, she gently wiped a few more times. It was a delicate touch. Her fingertips accidentally touched his thin lips. It was soft and itchy. There was an indescribable strange feeling. Long Fei Yi unconsciously looked up at her. However, Han Yunxi's thoughts were all on the poison in Long Fei Yi's body. How could she know how intimate this action was? She was still as serious as ever. After collecting enough blood, she immediately let go. When she let go, Long Fei Yi felt as if he had suddenly lost something. There was an indescribable sense of loss. Damn it! He had always been obsessed with cleanliness. He was even more repulsed by the touch of women. But facing this woman, after he lost his psychological resistance, he actually felt unsatisfied. It wasn't enough. Want to continue? This feeling of losing control made Long Fei Yi feel repulsed. He avoided her gaze and turned to look at Gu. Han Yunxi didn't know what Long Fei Yi was thinking. Once she collected the blood sample, she immediately squatted on the ground and took out the medical bag she carried with her. Chapter 121. On Gu's side, the masked assassins in black fell one by one. Mu Qingguo and guard Shengwan weren't stupid enough to not know that they had to capture them alive. However, these assassins were well trained and knew that they couldn't escape, so they all committed suicide by taking poison. Long Fei Yi watched from afar. If it was in the past, he would have lost his temper. Were these people useless if they couldn't even capture them alive? However, at this moment, although he was looking forward, he was absent-minded. After a while, he retracted his gaze and looked at Han Yunxi. He saw Han Yunxi squatting on the ground, fiddling with something in her medical bag. Her pale little face was full of seriousness and solemnity. This wasn't the first time Long Fei saw Han Yunxi so serious, but at this moment, he still couldn't look away. This woman's beauty was beyond his expectations, but when she was serious, she surpassed her beauty. Looking at her silently, Long Fei unconsciously raised his hand and gently touched the corner of his lips where she had touched just now. Finally, Han Yunxi identified the 3 poisons and found the antidote in the detoxification system that could be taken directly without needing to use acupuncture to expel the poison. She took out 3 pills from her medical bag and manually identified them to ensure that there was no mistake. God knows how nervous and worried she was. If there was one poison in Long Fei's body, even if it was one that she didn't know and couldn't detoxify, like the spider dart poison, then Long Fei would be in danger. Fortunately, these 3 poisons were considered ordinary to her. She thought that poisons like the spider dart, which were almost weaponized, should be very rare. Once she got the antidote, Han Yunxi suddenly stood up and stretched out her hand. Long Fei, here, the antidote. After saying that, she met his deep gaze. The moment their eyes met, Han Yunxi was stunned. She only felt that Long Fei's eyes had an unspeakable emotion that touched her heart. What's wrong with him? Her hand was stretched out in front of him. There were 3 pills lying in her fair palm. Her movements froze just like that. Long Fei didn't expect this woman to stand up so quickly. His gaze immediately dodged and soon returned to its usual coldness. He glanced at Han Yunxi's palm and asked, "Are you sure it's the antidote?" Han Yunxi looked at him suspiciously and said hurriedly, "I'm sure." "Hurry up and take it. You're already vomiting blood. If you don't take it, I'll have to use a scalpel to expel the poison." Long Fei nodded and swallowed the antidote in one gulp. Seeing him take the antidote, Han Yunxi was completely relieved. She heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest subconsciously. Long Fei looked at him. "What's wrong? What if I couldn't detoxify your poison? That would be terrible." Han Yunxi smiled and said casually. Who knew that Long Fei would become serious, and his gaze deepened. "What are you afraid of?" "Afraid that this prince will die." What was she afraid of? Han Yunxi didn't think that much. She was just anxious and afraid. Meeting his questioning gaze, she suddenly felt uncomfortable. She only felt that this guy was very strange and seemed to be a little different from usual. She pursed her lips and said jokingly, "You risked your life to save me. No matter what, I have to save you." Who knew that Long Fei would say coldly, "You're thinking too much. This prince only believes that you can detoxify the poison." If he didn't know that she had the ability to detoxify poison, why would Long Fei, who cherished his life so much, rush down to save her despite the sky full of poison? After all, what he feared the most was poison. Risking his life to save her. This woman wasn't that valuable to him. Han Yunxi obviously knew that Long Fei was certain that she could detoxify the poison, which was why he came down to save her. In fact, she was already very grateful that he discovered the poisonous mosquito swarm and rushed down to save her. She didn't dare to ask for more than that. Ignoring the trace of inexplicable sorrow in her heart, Han Yunxi chuckled. "This concubine knows that your highness believes that this concubine can detoxify the poison, so this concubine was afraid that I wouldn't be able to detoxify it and let your highness sacrifice himself in vain." Seeing Han Yunxi smile so brightly and so indifferently, Long Fei felt a kind of anger that had nowhere to vent. He originally thought that this proud woman would refute him, but she actually belittled herself. "Why did you run to the southern mountains to pick tea for no reason?" Long Fei changed the topic. If this woman hadn't gone to the southern mountains, the assassins wouldn't have had a chance to make their move and there wouldn't have been so much trouble. I heard that the Red South Peak is good, so this concubine wants to try it. Han Yunxi was still smiling faintly. Long Fei Yi looked her up and down and saw the whip wounds on her arms, but he didn't ask. Instead, he said coldly, "Did those assassins say anything? What clues did they leave behind?" "That masked man is the true mastermind behind the spies, and he's called their master. His left and right arms are called He Sha and Qingyi respectively. They're both women and their mouths are very tight, so I couldn't get anything out of them. I just knew that Qingyi should be the one in charge of all the spies in Tianning. Sister Wen is her direct subordinate, and she was the one who concocted the 10,000 snake poison in the young general's body," Han Yunxi replied seriously. To her, her greatest regret this time wasn't that she couldn't catch the mastermind, but that she couldn't catch Qingyi. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment, then said, "I suspect Qingyi is hiding in the capital." A trace of vigilance flashed through Long Fei Ye's eyes as he asked seriously, "Do you have anyone you suspect?" Although Han Yunxi didn't want to say it, she still had to. This matter involved many aspects, and she couldn't hide anything in front of Long Fei Yi. After a moment's hesitation, she still opened her mouth. "Qingyi is a middle-aged woman who's taciturn and cautious. Combined with the clues we already have on the 10,000 snake poison, I suspect that Qingyi is very likely the Han family's third Madam Li Mingmei." Then she quickly added, "Of course, this is only a suspicion. After all, there's no evidence for the 10,000 snake poison, so it's only a guess." Long Fei Ye's lips curved into a cold smile as he said coldly, "We've already found evidence, and the results will be out soon." "What?" Han Yunxi was shocked. Could it be that Long Fei Yi had found something in the Han family? When Long Fei Yi said that Bai Lu had stolen the tea leaves, Han Yunxi was very surprised. She didn't think that it would be like this. She didn't think that they would actually find the tea leaves. Originally, all the clues pointed to Madame Li and Han Ruoxue, and with the addition of the tea leaves, it was very likely that the tea leaves contained the 10,000 snake poison. As long as the 10,000 snake poison was found, this case would be solved. Poisonous tea leaves were very easy to detect. As long as a poison master had a bit of skill, they would be able to detect it. Once they returned, they would know the results. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi couldn't help but bite her lip as she became nervous. At this moment, Han Yunxi's feelings were very complicated. She was happy that she was about to solve the case and win the bet, but more importantly, she was heavy. If the crime fell on the Han family, how many innocent people would be implicated? How would the Han family be able to recover? At this moment, Mu Qingguo and the others came over. When Mu Qingguo came over, he immediately knelt down in front of Han Yunxi. "This official deserves to die. I wasn't able to protect the princess consort and let the princess consort suffer." Seeing this, Guard Shengwan also hurriedly knelt down. It was this official's negligence. This official is guilty. Please punish me, princess consort. Young general, Guard Shengwan, please rise. This happened too suddenly, so it's not your fault. Han Yunxi lightly said. She didn't have the arrogant nature of the royal family and loved to punish people. She only had herself to blame for being too weak after being kidnapped. Hearing this, Guard Shengwan was overjoyed and wanted to thank her. However, Mu Qingguo didn't get up and seriously said, "It was this official who brought the princess consort out. This official has the duty to protect the princess consort. Please punish me, princess consort." Seeing this, Guard Shengwan could only kneel with his head down. Han Yunxi knew Mu Qingguo's personality and personally bowed to help him up. "Young general, if I was injured, then I would definitely blame you. Now that I'm fine, you can be considered to have done a meritorious deed for saving the princess consort. Your merits offset your demerits. Mu Qingwu didn't dare to let Han Yunxi help him up and hurriedly stood up. After hesitating for a moment, he could only comply with Han Yunxi's wishes. Many thanks, Princess Consort. Guard Shengwan, you should also get up. Han Yunxi said. Guard Shengwan worked so hard just to make up for his demerits. He hurriedly stood up and said with a smile, Princess Consort is truly blessed by the heavens. You were scared but not in danger. The two of us followed His Highness to track down the poisonous mosquito swarm. We wanted to find the nest of those thieves, but it was a pity that we were so close. Hearing this, Han Yunxi's expression froze. She unconsciously looked at Long Fei Yi. She had been wondering why no one had chased after them for so many days. So it was because of this. Long Fei Yi had discovered the poisonous mosquito swarm long ago, but he didn't make a move the entire time. He wanted to cast a long line to catch a big fish. So, he used her as bait. He treated her like a child and threw her out to catch a wolf. She had foolishly been happy because of his appearance, but who would have thought that it would be like this? This bastard, did he know that if it wasn't for Gu, she would have already been taken away by that black-clothed masked man? Thinking of the black-clothed masked man's sinister words, this senior only wants you, Han Yunxi couldn't help feeling a chill run down her spine. She looked at Long Fei Yi and her eyes were filled with resentment. Guard Shengwan was speaking the truth, but Long Fei Yi had a cold look at him. Guard Shengwan's face was blank as he felt killing intent all around him. He quickly lowered his head in fear, not daring to look any further. He didn't know where he had gone wrong. Since it's like this, then I'll have to disappoint your highness. Han Yunxi softly said. Indeed. Long Fei Yi was indeed a bit disappointed that he hadn't been able to directly attack the root of the problem this time. He magnanimously accepted Han Yunxi's gaze. Their eyes met, and for some reason, the smell of gunpowder gradually filled the air. At this moment, a light laugh sounded. Your Highness Duke of Qin, although you didn't directly attack the nest of those people, it can be considered that you've met the main culprit. Congratulations, this is all due to esteemed Wang Fei's efforts. Looking in the direction of the voice, they saw Gu walking over. He was dressed in a red robe that could topple cities and had a brilliant smile that could topple countries. He was simply a great seductive evildoer. Long Fei Yi had long noticed the existence of this evildoer dressed in red and knew that this person had saved Han Yunxi. Chapter 122. The tense atmosphere lightened with Gu's arrival, but Long Fei Yi's question caused everyone to tense up again. Long Fei Yi wasn't mistaken. It was precisely because Hui Yang had colluded with a mole that those assassins had been able to kidnap Qin Wangfei so easily. Your Highness Duke of Qin, just as the steward was about to explain, Gu interrupted with a smile, Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one chased esteemed Wangfei all the way from Nanshan to here to ensure that esteemed Wangfei didn't come to any harm. Is this enough to offset my mistake? Guard Shengwan hurriedly chimed in, Your Highness Duke of Qin, it's all thanks to our owner. Otherwise, we would have been a step too late. These words were clearly trying to steal the Duke of Qin's credit. Guard Shengwan was usually a quick-witted person, but in front of His Highness Duke of Qin, he always spoke the truth. At this time, speaking the truth was undoubtedly the same as speaking the wrong thing. Long Fei Yi didn't like to hear it, and his cold gaze grew even colder. Of course, Long Fei Yi couldn't refute the truth. However, he could ignore it. What's with the injury on her arm? Long Fei Yi immediately asked. If he hadn't reminded her, Han Yunxi would have forgotten that her arm was injured by Gu. It was also because of this whip that Gu had the opportunity to snatch her away from the masked assassins. This whip was actually worth it. This one was careless and injured it while trying to save someone. Gu was very honest. An injury is an injury. There's no reason for it. Long Fei Yi refuted everything with a single sentence. Gu didn't seem to care. He simply smiled, as if saying, "Do as you please." However, the steward wasn't willing to give up. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, I beg you, on account of my master's actions in saving someone, please forgive the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop." Gu looked indifferent and did not stop guard Shengwan from begging for mercy. Gu knew that Long Fei Ye's next sentence would leave guard Shengwan speechless. He said, "Rescuing Qin Wangfei is something that should be done. It's not considered a merit, so how can it be offset?" Mu Qingwu listened from the side. He wanted to help guard Shengwan, but he didn't dare to open his mouth. He had a feeling that His Highness Duke of Qin was in a bad mood because of guard Shengwan's honest words. Finally, Gu's smiling peach blossom eyes flashed with a trace of malice, but it was hidden as soon as it appeared. He was still smiling like a flower. "Your Highness is right. Is the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House willing to listen to your orders?" He chased after Han Yunxi and saved Han Yunxi for two reasons. Firstly, he was very interested in this woman and wanted to make friends with her. Secondly, he wanted to see who dared to lay an ambush in his Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. As for compensating for his mistakes with merits, he had never thought about it, nor did he need it. The Heavenly Fragrance Tea House was one of his favorite properties in Tianing country. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel heartache. But no matter how much he liked it, it was just a tea house. He could afford to lose it. But as soon as guard Shengwan heard these words, he cried out, "Your Highness Duke of Qin is a magnanimous man. I beg Your Highness Duke of Qin to be lenient. A traitor had caused Qin Wangfei to be kidnapped. This crime was enough to shut down the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House and confiscate everything in the national treasury. The owner had invested money in buying the land, but he was the one managing it." Guard Shengwan's heart was bleeding. Unexpectedly, Long Fei said coldly, "Your lordship is already being magnanimous by not investigating the mistakes of you and your servant. Aside from this, your lordship will investigate everything and everyone in the Celestial Fragrance Tea Plantation to the end." At these words, Gu finally narrowed his eyes. Long Fei Yi wasn't investigating him, but the tea house and its people. Without a doubt, he was investigating his background. What he hated the most was people investigating him. Gu was about to speak when Han Yunxi beat him to it. "Your Highness, if Gu hadn't acted in time, Qinxia would have lost her life long ago. Qinxia doesn't blame the young general, nor does she want to blame anyone in the tea house. Moreover, Gu risked his life to save me just then. He was brave and fearless. Based on this point alone, Qinxia is willing to pardon his crimes." Han Yunxi emphasized the part about risking his life to save Long Fei Yi. Her clear eyes stared straight into Long Fei Yi's, her attitude resolute. No one expected Han Yunxi to open her mouth to plead for leniency. No, to be exact, she wasn't pleading for leniency. She was directly asking for forgiveness. It wasn't clear what had angered Long Fei Yi. His nose trembled slightly as he said coldly, "You don't have the right to ask for forgiveness. Qinxia does. The one who was kidnapped was Qinxia, not your highness." Han Yunxi challenged him on the spot, leaving Mu Qingwu and guard Shengwan dumbstruck. Meanwhile, Gu's lips quirked up as he rejoiced in her misfortune. Even Emperor Tianhui had never challenged Long Fei Yi to his face. Was Han Yunxi pulling on the dragon's whiskers and touching his reverse scale in public? She had guts. If one listened carefully, they'd be able to hear Long Fei Yi clench his fists in his sleeves. His face was still expressionless as he reminded her word by word, "Han Yunxi, everything about you belongs to your lordship. Your authority belongs to me as well. In front of your lordship, you have no right at all. Han Yunxi was afraid of Long Fei, but every time she lost her temper, she forgot her fear. She refused to budge an inch, but gave tit for tat as she retorted word by word. Qinxia refuses to accept this. Qinxia will enter the palace to see His Majesty and ask him to make a decision. Heavens! If this wasn't a threat, what else could it be? Mu Qingwu and guard Shengwan both sucked in a breath of cold air. They couldn't help but worry. Would this woman lose her life before she even entered the palace, or even before she walked out of these mountains? Wasn't this a little too audacious? She'd been betrothed to His Highness Duke of Qin by the Empress Dowager, but now she dared to use the Emperor to threaten His Highness Duke of Qin. Had this woman gone mad? It had to be said that even the gloating Gu had raised an eyebrow as he gave Han Yunxi a strange look. This woman was quite the hard-working one. Was she really that grateful to him in her heart? Finally, the veins on Long Fei Ye's forehead bulged. His expression was so gloomy that it looked like water could drip from it. Just when everyone thought he'd fly into a rage, he didn't say another word. He grabbed Han Yunxi and left in a flash. A complicated look flashed through Gu's eyes. He was about to give chase when Mu Qingwu stopped him. Gu, His Highness is in a fit of anger right now. You'd better take care of yourself. Gu chuckled and taunted, What? The young general has been pardoned. Doesn't it hurt your back to stand and talk? This evildoer really had a venomous tongue. His words hit Mu Qingwu's sore spot. Mu Qingwu was actually the main culprit in this matter. If he hadn't gone to beg and brought esteemed Wang Fei to the tea house, esteemed Wang Fei wouldn't have been involved in the 10,000 snake poison case and wouldn't have been targeted by the assassins. Mu Qingwu felt apologetic in his heart. He resentfully let go of his hand and didn't say anything. However, Gu didn't plan on giving chase. He glanced at guard Shengwan and lazily said, Shengwan, let's go back. Villa Lord, what should we do? What if His Highness Duke of Qin really does seal the tea house? Villa Lord, is there no room for discussion? Esteemed Villa Lord, why don't you chase after them and take a look? Despite guard Shengwan's persuasion, Gu didn't seem to hear a thing. His lips curled into a smile as he walked lazily and elegantly. After walking for a while, he lightly tapped his foot and gracefully flew up. His wide red dress fluttered lightly as he flew into the distance like a red iris. Master! Guard Shengwan anxiously chased after him. Mu Qingwu watched them disappear into the distance before gently exhaling. He didn't know how to deal with this matter. He was more worried about esteemed Wang Fei. In the past few days, he hadn't counted how many mountains he had chased after. He estimated that it would take a few days to return. Mu Qingwu wanted to find His Highness Duke of Qin, but he didn't have the courage. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi in his hand as he rapidly traversed through the forest. His face was expressionless and he didn't say a word. His large hand just happened to be wrapped around the whip wound on Han Yunxi's arm. Han Yunxi's brows furrowed in pain, but she didn't cry out. Her face was even paler than before and her eyes were downcast. It wasn't clear whether it was because she was angry or because she really didn't have the strength. She leaned against Long Fei Ye's chest, throwing her entire weight onto him. Finally, at sunset, the furious Long Fei Yi felt a sticky sensation on his hand. He slowed down and looked down. He saw that his hand was tightly wrapped around the whip wound on Han Yunxi's arm. Whether it was her arm or his hand, they were both covered in blood. Damn it! Long Fei Yi growled. He immediately landed under a large tree. He let go of Han Yunxi and coldly ordered, treat the wound immediately. Unexpectedly, as soon as he let go, Han Yunxi leaned against the tree trunk. She couldn't stand steadily at all and slowly fell to the side. After running around for several days, she was so tired that she didn't dare to close her eyes. In addition, she had just been poisoned with a mess of poisons that had accumulated in her body. Coupled with the pain in her arm, how could her frail body withstand it? She had been stubbornly relying on her mental strength to support herself. Now, she was really, really tired. At this moment, she didn't care about the pain or goo. She just wanted to lie down and have a good sleep. It would be better if she never woke up. Seeing that Han Yunxi ignored him and slowly leaned down, Long Fei Yi urged unhappily, "Did you hear me?" Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Han Yunxi really fell to the ground. Long Fei Yi was shocked. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with this woman. He strode forward and caught her. Han Yunxi looked up slightly at him. Her pale lips curled into a faint smile. It seemed to be self-deprecating and contemptuous. Long Fei Yi felt very uncomfortable looking at her. "What's wrong with you?" Long Fei Yi helped her sit down. His voice was still cold. Han Yunxi leaned against his arm. Her eyes were drooping and almost closed. She let him ask her anything. She didn't look at him or speak. He didn't know if she was ignoring him or she didn't have the energy to do so. "Han Yunxi, say something." Long Fei Ye's cold voice revealed some anxiety. However, Han Yunxi didn't respond. In the dim light, her face was as pale as a dying person. Long Fei Yi hurriedly took her pulse. He still knew the basics of pulse reading. Only now did he realize that this woman was terrifyingly weak. In this situation, if she lost more blood, it would be very fatal. He had already thrown his monstrous anger to the back of his mind. He hurriedly took her medical bag. When he opened it, he realized that this seemingly all-purpose medical bag didn't have many things in it. Other than some medicine that he didn't recognize, there were only some gold needles and gauze. Fortunately, he was a martial arts practitioner, so he carried Jinchuang ointment with him. Long Fei Yi let Han Yunxi lean against the tree trunk and sit steadily. Only then did he help her bandage her wound. However, Han Yunxi was so tired that she couldn't sit still. When Long Fei Yi let go, she fell to the side again. Chapter 123. This woman, why was she trying to be strong for Gu, who she didn't even know? Long Fei Ye's face was full of displeasure, but he still held Han Yunxi with one hand and took off his cloak with the other. Only then did he let her lie down slowly. The extremely exhausted Han Yunxi felt as if she was in a bed the moment she touched the ground. She closed her eyes without a care for anything else, as if she was sleeping, as if she was unconscious. "Hey! Han Yunxi!" Long Fei Yi pushed her a few times, but she still didn't respond. His handsome brows unconsciously furrowed. He couldn't care less and first helped her stop the bleeding. Although his complexion wasn't very good, Long Fei Ye's hands were very careful and gentle. No one knew that the aloof and cold His Highness Duke of Qin could be so gentle when treating your injuries. If Han Yunxi hadn't fainted, she would have been so nervous that she couldn't breathe, just like last time when he rubbed her feet. Unfortunately, she was already unconscious. The whip wound on her arm wasn't shallow. Her clothes were rolled up into the wound and mixed with the flesh and blood. It was a shocking sight. However, this kind of injury was nothing to Long Fei Yi. However, he still carefully removed the clothes that were rolled up in the flesh and blood, as if he was afraid that Han Yunxi would feel pain. He glanced at her from time to time, and only continued when he saw that she was quiet. After treating the wound, applying medicine and bandaging it to stop the bleeding, he finally finished before the sky turned dark. It was already winter, and in this deep forest, it was even colder at night. Long Fei Yi started a fire. After hesitating for a long time, he still picked up Han Yunxi and let her sleep in his arms. Although there was a cloak on the ground, it was still cold. Han Yunxi, who had originally been curled up, was snuggled into his warm embrace. She actually opened her eyes in a daze. Long Fei Yi looked down from above, his voice cold without a trace of warmth. Awake? Han Yunxi looked at him and then looked around. She only felt that her head was heavy and throbbing. After a while, she came to her senses and understood what was going on. Once she understood, she struggled to get up, but Long Fei Yi held her down and said coldly, "You're so weak. Do you still want to die?" Han Yunxi glanced at her arm and chuckled. "I don't want to. Lie down obediently if you don't want to die." Long Fei Yi's expression was not pleasant. He turned his gaze away and looked into the darkness ahead. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi suddenly cried out and spat out a mouthful of black blood before coughing violently. "You're poisoned." Long Fei Yi was shocked. He never thought that Han Yunxi, a detoxification expert, would also be poisoned. However, the symptoms of his previous poisoning were also spitting out black blood. He was very sure that this was poisoning. Han Yunxi's already pale face became even paler. Her entire body was as weak as a thin piece of paper. If not for Long Fei Yi holding her in his arms, she would probably have been blown away by the wind. She was a detoxification expert. If she was poisoned, she would be able to detoxify it almost immediately. However, she gave that, almost immediately, to him and forgot about herself. "Medicine, bring me my medical kit," Han Yunxi said weakly. Long Fei Yi immediately took the medical kit and poured out all the medicine inside. He asked in a deep voice, "Which one? Which one?" Looking at the bottles and jars on the ground, Han Yunxi suddenly wanted to cry. There was no antidote in the medical kit. She only wanted to use the medical kit as a cover to reach into the space of the detoxification system to get the antidote. This guy poured out all the medicine. How was she going to get it? Bastard! I really didn't want to meet you. Han Yunxi wanted to cry but had no tears. Long Fei Yi angrily shouted at her, "Which one? Tell me." His anger could not hide his anxiety. Han Yunxi laid in the crook of his arm and looked up at his cold and handsome face. She was dizzy. Suddenly, she asked without thinking, "Long Fei Yi, you used me as bait to lure the enemy. What if I got bitten?" She was overjoyed that he came to save her. If he came to use her as bait to catch a big fish, she would rather he not come. Anyway, she thought that he wouldn't come at that time. The most hateful thing in the world was to give someone hope and then disappoint them. Long Fei never expected Han Yunxi to ask such a question. He looked at her and gave a start, but quickly recovered his wits. "I won't," he said mildly. "No what?" Han Yunxi asked again. Her drowsy eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She looked pitiful and lovely. Long Fei Yi looked at her, but he did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. He suddenly said angrily, "Where is the antidote?" Startled, Han Yunxi's hazy eyes immediately vanished as she woke up 70% of her senses. Damn it! What kind of question did she ask? "Where is the antidote?" Long Fei Yi asked again in a low voice. He was on the verge of exploding. "Let me think about it." Han Yunxi answered timidly. It was as if he was the one who was poisoned, not her, so she was in a hurry to get the antidote. Her so-called think was, of course, activating the detoxification system. Han Yunxi thought about it and tried hard to concentrate. If it were any other time, it would just take some effort. However, at this time, she was exhausted and had a hard time doing it. She had no choice but to close her eyes. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi panicked again. "What's wrong?" I'm thinking. Han Yunxi was suffering but could not say it out loud. Long Fei knitted his brows, not daring to disturb her any further. Han Yunxi thought it over for a while before she finally focused her attention on activating the detox system. Long Fei Yi had never taken care of anyone before, especially a woman. How would he know how delicate a woman's body was? He gently patted Han Yunxi's back. Seeing that she had stopped vomiting, he poured out another 6 pills. Get up and swallow them one by one. But Han Yunxi did not move. She was so weak that she did not even have the strength to lift her head. Long Fei Yi picked up her head. If you don't take the medicine, the poison will take effect and you will die. Don't blame Ben Wang for not saving you. Who knew that Han Yunxi's small head would softly slide down from his hand? At this time, Long Fei Yi finally realized the seriousness of the situation. This woman was so weak that it was frightening. Long Fei Yi's heart flashed with a sense of fear that even he was unfamiliar with. In a panic, he immediately sent out a palm of true qi and poured it into Han Yunxi's back. But who knew that after this palm of true qi was poured in, Han Yunxi would spit out 3 mouthfuls of black blood. Long Fei Yi then realized his mistake. This woman was already poisoned. If he poured his true qi into her, it would speed up the blood circulation and it would undoubtedly speed up the poison's reaction. He had always been calm and had never made such a mistake in a panic. What was going on this time? In order to transfer his true qi to her, he had to first remove the poison in her body. A trace of irritation flashed across his handsome face. Long Fei Yi was still patient. He took out a pill and was about to stuff it into Han Yunxi's mouth. But very quickly, he stopped. He was afraid that if he used too much strength, this woman would vomit it out again. Helpless, he could only place the pill in his palm and put it close to her mouth. Eat it yourself. 1 pill at a time. That palm of true qi caused the poison to run amok in Han Yunxi's body. At the same time, it also made her more energetic. She looked at the medicine in Long Fei Yi's palm and slowly raised her head. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi immediately carefully supported her. Antidote ah, her life-saving antidote ah. Han Yunxi was actually more anxious than Long Fei Yi. But she was really frightened earlier and did not dare to let Long Fei Yi feed her again. She forced herself to support herself. Tilting her head, she leaned close to his hand. Her orchid breath poured into his palm. It was soft and fluffy and indescribably comfortable. Then, Han Yunxi stretched out her small tongue and gently rolled up a pill. Inadvertently, the soft tip of her tongue swept across Long Fei Yi's palm. Long Fei Yi could not help but feel his body and mind sway. He felt a numb feeling spread from his palm to his entire body. Han Yunxi forced herself to swallow the pill and leaned over again. Her soft tongue once again rolled up Long Fei Yi's palm. Long Fei Yi unconsciously tensed up. He felt an indescribable sense of loss. By the time Han Yunxi took away the pills for the 3rd time, Long Fei was already on the verge of losing all his self-control. This was simply torture, but he still felt a little fascinated by the feeling. This tormenting little demoness. If this went on, the self-control that he had been proud of all these years would definitely collapse. Finally, he could not hold it in anymore. He withdrew his palm and said in a low voice, "I'll feed you." Han Yunxi looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. 1 pill at a time. Eat it yourself. Long Fei Yi said patiently. Then, without waiting for Han Yunxi's consent, he took the pill and stuffed it between her tightly shut lips. Han Yunxi saw the veins on his forehead bulging and thought that this impatient guy was angry again. She did not dare to refuse and obediently ate the pill. 1 pill at a time, he finally swallowed all 6 pills without a hitch. Chapter 124. Han Yunxi took 6 antidotes. After the antidotes took effect, Long Fei Yi transferred 3 streams of true energy to her. Every time the true qi entered her body, Han Yunxi felt refreshed and refreshed. It was as if she'd been instantly filled with blood. Unfortunately, she was still too tired, so this feeling only lasted for a moment. After 3 streams of true energy, her pulse wasn't that weak anymore. However, her body still didn't have much strength. She was paralyzed in the crook of Long Fei Ye's arm. She didn't even bother to move her eyelids. Long Fei Yi didn't move either. His arm bore all of her strength. The surroundings were silent. The flames of the bonfire jumped. The wind under the tree wasn't strong, but they could hear the whistling of the wind in the distance. Tonight, it looked like they would have to spend the night here. After a while, Long Fei Ye's handsome brows returned to their usual calmness. He looked at Han Yunxi, who was lying on her side in the crook of his arm. His eyes flashed with a trace of complexity, as if he was thinking about something. As for Han Yunxi, once the poison in her body was cured, she was relieved to completely hand herself over to Long Fei Yi. Her eyelashes fluttered a few times and her eyes slowly closed. She fell asleep. As for the matter with Gu, it seemed that the two of them had forgotten about it. Neither of them took the initiative to mention it since the afternoon. As the night deepened, Long Fei Yi slowly recovered from his own world. Seeing Han Yunxi sleeping so peacefully, he subconsciously reached out to brush away the strands of hair that had fallen on her cheek. However, when he touched her hair, his fingers suddenly froze. After pausing for a while, he didn't continue and withdrew his hand. He didn't like this strange feeling of losing control. Once he withdrew his hand, he put Han Yunxi down and let her lean against the tree trunk to sleep. He was also sleepy and didn't have the habit of sleeping with a woman. Just as he was about to climb up the tree, he stopped as he remembered something. He checked Han Yunxi's ankle and found traces of dried blood on the gauze. Troublesome. Long Fei had lost count of how many times he'd knitted his brows tonight. He'd just taken out some medicine from his medical pouch and carefully changed the dressing on Han Yunxi's wounds again. After he finished, it was already the middle of the night. Han Yunxi wrapped herself in the cloak and slept soundly. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi gently smiled. He really didn't know why this woman didn't have any vigilance. Wasn't she afraid that he would leave her in the wilderness? He looked down on such a thoughtless woman. When Han Yunxi woke up the next morning, she found herself leaning against a large tree trunk. The fire in front of her had long been extinguished. She was draped in Long Fei's cloak, but he was nowhere to be seen. Where was he? Her head was still a bit dizzy. After she vomited out the 6 pills last night, she was in a semi-conscious state. She only remembered that Long Fei Yi had given her 3 streams of true energy. As for how she ate the 6 antidotes and how she fell asleep, she had completely forgotten. She tried to stretch her arms and found that the wounds on her arms had been treated, and they were treated quite well. Well, she didn't seem to remember what had happened before she took the medicine. Her body was recovering quite well. It seemed that the 3 streams of true energy from last night were still useful, but they took effect rather slowly. She stood up to stretch her muscles and bones while looking around. She didn't notice that her ankle, which hadn't fully recovered, was already completely healed. No matter how she stepped on it, it didn't hurt. Long Fei Yi rested his head on his hands and reclined on the tree trunk. With this woman sleeping under a tree in the wilderness, how could he sleep peacefully? He didn't sleep the entire night. Seeing that the sun had risen, he had just closed his eyes for a while when he was woken up. Cold, he squinted his eyes and didn't make a sound. After Han Yunxi stretched her muscles and bones and confirmed that she was fine, her first reaction was to look up at the tree. Immediately, she saw Long Fei Yi staring at her. How did this woman know that he was in the tree? Long Fei Yi didn't expect this. After looking at her for a moment, he said cold, "You're awake." Han Yunxi nodded. She knew that this guy wouldn't abandon her. If he wasn't in the tree, he must be nearby. Last night. Thank you. Although she was tormented to death, in the end, it was this guy who saved her. Long Fei Yi didn't pay attention to her thanks. He landed gracefully from the tree and said cold, "Return to the capital." It was time to return to the capital. Although he didn't directly attack the trader's nest this time, at least he managed to interrogate a jar of tea leaves at the Celestial Fragrance Tea House. Long Fei Yi was still looking forward to the results of the examination. His words reminded Han Yunxi. She was suddenly shocked and grabbed Long Fei Yi excitedly. What time is it today? Heavens! How could she forget about the bet? She didn't even know how long she had been unconscious in the cave, let alone remember how many days she had been kidnapped. When she went to the Celestial Fragrance Tea House with Mu Qingguo, there were only 12 days left until the bet with Mu Luiyue. How many days had passed since then? She wouldn't lose because she missed the bet, right? Long Fei Yi frowned and looked at Han Yunxi's hand. He suddenly said sternly, "Let go." So fierce. Han Yunxi immediately let go. She didn't like to pull and pull with this guy. She was too anxious and her hand slipped. "I'm 14 today." Long Fei Yi still answered her. Upon hearing that it was 14, Han Yunxi heaved a huge sigh of relief. Thank goodness, thank goodness. She had almost been scared to death. The bet with Mu Luiyue ended on the 19th. Today was only the 14th. Counting from start to finish, there were still 6 days left. Yesterday, Long Fei Yi had rushed through the forest like a madman. With his speed, he should be able to return to the capital in 1 or 2 days. Han Yunxi silently counted the time. Long Fei Yi impatiently said, "Are you going or not?" "Yes." Han Yunxi immediately answered. Long Fei glanced at her unhappily before grabbing her by the waist. Just like yesterday, they began to weave through the forest again. Han Yunxi felt that the strength around her waist was rather heavy. She couldn't understand why the guy who had ordered her to let go of him in disgust was holding her so tightly now. What kind of weird misophobia was this? Last night, in a daze, he didn't seem so fierce. He really was a big ice cube whose mood kept changing. Stealing a glance, Han Yunxi saw Long Fei Yi's cold and resolute profile. She couldn't help but bite her lip. Was she still going to talk about Gu's matters? He hadn't argued with her since yesterday, so what did he mean by that? Was he going to insist on punishing the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop, or go along with her wishes? If he insisted on punishing the tea shop, he'd probably say a few harsh words to her. After all, she really did threaten him with her words before. If he went along with her wishes, then fine. Han Yunxi immediately rejected the idea as soon as it appeared in her head. She'd rather believe that the sun would rise from the west than believe that this guy would obey her wishes under her threats. Although he seemed to have obeyed her once or twice, the situation this time was different. Just what kind of attitude did this guy have? After being threatened, he took her away without a word. What did he mean by that? No matter his attitude towards the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop, she'd used Emperor Tianhui to threaten him in front of everyone. That was enough to make her suffer the consequences. There was no reason for this guy not to settle accounts with her. Actually, Han Yunxi had only been angry because Gu had used her as bait yesterday. She was smart enough to tell that Gu didn't really want to save her, but wanted to use her as bait to uncover the true mastermind behind the scenes. Otherwise, Gu would have saved her long ago in the cave, wouldn't he? Now that her anger had subsided, Han Yunxi felt both fear and regret when she thought back to yesterday's crazy threats. Conflicted, she stole another glance at Long Fei Yi, only to feel the cold aura emanating from his face. In the end, she lowered her head. If he didn't bring up this matter, could she just treat it as a bygone matter? As for the celestial fragrance tea shop, Gu could go there on his own. Long Fei Ye's speed was truly fast. By the afternoon of 2 days later, they'd reached Tianning's capital city and rode a carriage into the city from the west gates. Long Fei closed his eyes to take a nap while Han Yunxi snuggled lazily. She decided to ignore everything else when they got back and eat some hot food first. Then she'd soak in a comfortable hot bath to wash away the stench of bad luck. Unexpectedly, the carriage stopped before it even reached the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. What's going on? Long Fei Yi immediately opened his eyes. Through the curtains, the driver's tone was a little anxious. Your Highness, something seems to have happened up ahead. A large group of people are running forward. Take a detour, take the back. Long Fei Yi disliked crowds the most. So speaking, he closed his eyes again. Even if his body was made of iron, he'd still get tired. The driver quickly turned the carriage around and took a detour to the back gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunxi lifted the curtains and looked outside, only to see the commoners on the streets running forward excitedly to join in the fun. She didn't take it to heart, but stole a glance at Long Fei Yi before continuing to snuggle up lazily. But by the time they reached the back gates, they realized that it was the Duke of Qin's estate that was in trouble. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had hardly entered when Steward Xia came running over. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, you're finally back. Something's happened. Something big has happened. Steward Xia's anxiousness made Han Yunxi's heart thump against her chest. What's the matter? Speak properly. Long Fei Yi was very calm, without any fluctuations in his emotions. Steward Xia looked at Han Yunxi. Although he was in a difficult position, he still anxiously said, the Han family's Madame Su came to seek an audience with esteemed Wang Fei. This servant said that esteemed Wang Fei wasn't in the estate and told her to come another day, but who knew that she would cause a ruckus at the door. She said that esteemed Wang Fei must see esteemed Wang Fei today and wouldn't leave. She also said esteemed Wang Fei, she. Before Steward Xia could finish, Han Yunxi immediately screamed and rushed to the front gates without another word. She knew what was going on. Damn it. After being kidnapped this time, she was physically and mentally exhausted. She even almost forgot about the bet, so how could she still remember the 10-day appointment with Madame Su? When she first went to the Han estate, Madame Su and the rest didn't believe that Han Kongan had given her the storehouse key for safekeeping so she could choose a successor. They forced her to hand over the key, so she agreed to let them see Han Kongan 10 days later. Actually, meeting Han Kongan was as easy as turning over a hand, but she only wanted Madame Su and the rest to wait a little longer. Who knew that she'd be kidnapped? Today was the 16th, one day after the 10-day appointment. She'd missed the appointment. But even her father, the Minister of Appointments, didn't dare to run to the Duke of Qin's gates to make a ruckus, to say nothing of a trifling Madame Su. There had to be a powerful figure backing her up, or else she wouldn't be so arrogant. Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about the person behind the scenes. She had to see Madame Su immediately, or else the news would spread all over the city. But as soon as Han Yunxi left the courtyard, she saw Murong Wanru supporting Grand Concubine Yi from the other side. Grand Concubine Yi's well-maintained face was pulled longer than a horse's. Chapter 125. Although they were still some distance away from the gates, they could clearly hear the ruckus outside. Lady Su seemed to have said something that attracted the attention of the surrounding crowd, creating a ruckus outside. Han Yunxi heard it, so did Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru. Although she was anxious, Han Yunxi still pursed her lips and bowed in greeting. Good luck to Mu Fei. Grand Concubine Yi had no idea what was going on outside. Steward Xia was going to report to her, but as soon as he saw His Highness Duke of Qin and Wang Fei return, he reported to them first. He didn't have time to tell Grand Concubine Yi. Seeing Han Yunxi hurry over, Grand Concubine Yi was about to ask when Murong Wanru spoke up. Sister-in-law, did you go on a long trip these past few days? Why haven't I seen you around? I've looked for you a few times, but I couldn't find you. Went on a long trip. Grand Concubine Yi was surprised. For better or worse, Han Yunxi was part of the Duke of Qin's estate. Why didn't she report to her when she went on a long trip? She couldn't have gone to the Empress Dowager's palace, right? Ever since Han Yunxi came back from the Empress Dowager's palace, Grand Concubine Yi had always been on guard. She'd secretly told Murong Wanru to keep an eye on her. Murong Wanru had been keeping tabs on Han Yunxi's movements the entire time. She hadn't come back after leaving with Mu Qingwu that day. Murong Wanru couldn't find out much about the Major General's estate, nor did she dare. But she'd been keeping tabs on the Han family and had long sent people there to ask around. Han Yunxi had agreed to take the Han family's madams and young misses to see Han Kongan in the prisons of the justice courts. They should have gone yesterday, but Han Yunxi hadn't been at home. Lady Su had come to find her last night and she'd been the one to receive her. The kidnapping incident involved a traitor, so it was hard for Han Yunxi to say. She simply made up a lie. I caught a cold these past few days and didn't get out of bed. It's only gotten better today. Upon hearing this, Murong Wanru hurried over, her face full of concern. You haven't gotten out of bed for so many days. It must be the wind and cold, right? Then why doesn't sister-in-law rest more? Han Yunxi was in a hurry to deal with the situation at the door. She didn't have time to pretend with Murong Wanru here. She ignored Murong Wanru and said mildly, Mu Fei, there's something outside the door. I'll go take care of it. So speaking, she strode off, but Grand Concubine Yi only said coldly, Han Yunxi, you weren't at home these past few days. Where did you go? Could it be that the commotion at the door is directed at you? Hearing this, Han Yunxi was surprised. Grand Concubine Yi still didn't know what was going on outside. It seemed that the person behind Madame Su was unlikely to be Murong Wanru. Although Han Yunxi was suspicious, she admitted honestly, yes, it's just a misunderstanding. Don't worry, Mu Fei. Qinxie will definitely handle it properly. Sister-in-law, the noise isn't small. It seems like someone's cursing someone. Since they dared to cause trouble at our Duke of Qin's gates, they must have a powerful background. Who did you provoke? Can you go out by yourself? Murong Wanru, this white lotus, really had a formidable mouth. Her words sounded like concern, but they easily provoked Grand Concubine Yi's curiosity and anger. Before Han Yunxi could speak, Grand Concubine Yi said coldly, Han Yunxi, I'd like to see who you've provoked to have the guts to cause a ruckus at my gates. So speaking, she flicked her sleeves and strode towards the doors. This damned Murong Wanru. Would she die if she didn't disgust and sow discord every time they met? Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with anger as she chased after her. If it's a blessing, it's not a calamity. If it's a calamity, it can't be avoided. Even if Lady Su had the guts to cause a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's gates, that should be her limit. It's just asking for a storehouse key, so she wouldn't really cause a ruckus, right? In any case, she wanted to see her and fulfill her promise of 10 days ago. She could just go out and bring the Han family to see Han Kongan right away. But by the time Han Yunxi reached the gates and heard the voices outside, she realized she'd underestimated the severity of the situation. Lady Su hadn't come alone, but had brought with her a bunch of loud, gossipy old women. They were all shouting at the gates. Everyone, tell us, what kind of good intentions does a married daughter have to come back and interfere with her family's affairs? Our Han family's storehouse key is the symbol of the head of house. Our Han family's young masters are all there, so why should Han Yunshi hog the key? What's she saying? My old master gave her the storehouse key for safekeeping until one of the young masters is chosen as the head of house. Everyone, think about it. Is that possible? Can you believe it? Han Yunshi isn't even the mother of the Han family. Has my old master gone senile? As I see it, my old master isn't senile, but had no other choice. Otherwise, why would he give such an important thing to a married daughter? Lady Su and the gossipy old women muttered amongst the crowd, attracting many questions and support. That doesn't make sense. Even if eldest young Miss Han is Qin Wangfei, she has no right to interfere with her family's affairs. This is too absurd. A married daughter, hee. Is she going back to her family to fight for the family fortune? That can't be. Would the Duke of Qin care about the Han family's meager fortune? Then what's going on? So it's Grand Concubine Yi who embezzled Han Yunshi's allowance. This esteemed Wangfei doesn't have any silver to spend, right? Murong Wanru supported Grand Concubine Yi by the arm as they stood by the door. The more she listened, the uglier her expression turned. Han Yunshi sucked in a cold breath. She didn't expect things to develop to this point. She assumed that Lady Su had only come to ask for the storehouse key. If she was a little more impudent, she'd just accuse her of coveting the Han family's property. Who knew that she'd implicate Grand Concubine Yi in the matter? Wasn't this slandering Grand Concubine Yi? Esteemed Imperial Concubine Yi couldn't afford to lose face. Mu Fei, it's all a misunderstanding. I'll go out and clear things up right now, Han Yunshi said, rushing to open the door. But Grand Concubine Yi stopped her, so angry that her teeth chattered. Listen, keep listening. Mu Fei, it's better. Han Yunshi wanted to explain, but Grand Concubine Yi suddenly said sternly, Han Yunshi, you shut up. Han Yunshi gave a start before she resentfully shut her mouth. Things had already gotten to this point, so she could only continue. But more outrageous words came from outside the door. Although the Duke of Qin's estate is rich and overbearing and doesn't care for the Han family's fart property, the Han family storehouse has rare medicinal ingredients. What they want isn't silver, but medicinal ingredients. These days, you can't buy good ingredients even if you have silver. That's possible. I heard that esteemed Wangfei went to the Han family storehouse that day. Who knows what treasures she took away? Tisk tsk, what right does a married daughter have to enter her maternal family storehouse? The Duke of Qin's estate is going too far. I think someone from the Duke of Qin's estate must have bribed the justice courts. Otherwise, old Master Han wouldn't be so muddle-headed. Madam Su, wasn't the new Chancellor of the Supreme Court promoted by your father? Don't you know what happened in the Supreme Court? Lady Su immediately choked with sobs. Ever since the old master was sent to prison, no one from our Han family has been allowed to visit him. So what if my father promoted the justice court official? There's an expert behind him that won't let us see the old master. Boos rose at her words. No one knew that Han Yunshi was the one who saved the crown prince, so they didn't believe that Han Yunshi had any special privileges in the justice courts. Most of them were certain that the expert behind the scenes was Grand Concubine Yi. But someone spoke up on purpose. Who's behind the scenes? Qin Wangfei can't command the justice courts, right? I heard that she's never been favored even now. Now that you mention it, could it be that someone instigated Qin Wangfei to go back to her maternal family to fight for the family fortune? Someone shouted on purpose. Even an idiot could tell that all these mocking and ridiculing words were directed at Grand Concubine Yi. Grand Concubine Yi's body trembled as her vision turned black and white. She almost fainted, but Murong Wanru caught her in time. Grand Concubine E had lived a life of luxury ever since she was young. She was such a noble and virtuous person that she'd never been shabby. The previous emperor had left her with so many gifts, but she'd left them all in the palace. Leaving aside the Han family's possessions, she hadn't even coveted the imperial family's possessions. But now someone was slandering her like this. After living for so long, this was the first time she'd lost so much face. Moreover, it was in front of the citizens of the capital city. How was she supposed to show her face in the future? If news of this reached the palace and the Empress Dowager's ears, then the noblewomen's ears, how was she supposed to face anyone in the future? How could she tolerate this? With one hand supported by Murong Wanru, Grand Concubine E rubbed her forehead with the other to calm herself down. Her phoenix eyes glared at Han Yunshi as if she wanted to cut Han Yunshi into pieces. Han Yunshi had never seen Grand Concubine E so ruthless before and couldn't help but give a start. She couldn't care less as she turned to open the door. But Grand Concubine E only roared, "Someone come, drag her out for me." Grand Concubine E could very well issue orders to chase away everyone at the gates. Anyone who dared to criticize would be punished as a crime against their superiors. But if she did that, her reputation would be ruined. Heaven knows what kind of rumors would spread next. Since the target was Han Yunshi and the group of shrews wanted the storehouse key, of course she had to hand over Han Yunshi and the key. The doors slowly opened and the noisy crowd outside quieted down. It had to be said that there were truly a lot of onlookers. 3 circles inside and 3 circles outside weren't enough to describe it. Lady Su and a few old matrons stood in the middle of the crowd, not facing the Duke of Qin's gates, but the common people. It was obvious that they were inciting the crowd to cause trouble. Still, in a society ruled by imperial power was enough of a deterrent. As soon as the doors opened, everyone fell silent. Lady Su and the old matrons quickly turned around as well. Mu Luiyue had been hiding in the crowd to watch the show. As soon as she saw Han Yunshi emerge, her lips curved into a cold, disdainful smile. As the date of the bet drew closer, of course she was concerned about the progress of the case. Unfortunately, she couldn't get any news from her father or big brother. However, she'd learned from Murong Wanru that Han Yunshi hadn't been home recently. As it turned out, she'd been too busy with the case. There were only 3 days left until the appointed time, so of course she had to find a way to delay Han Yunshi's investigation. It was only 3 days. She'd wait until Han Yunshi's notoriety reached its peak and everyone was cursing her. Then she'd add a layer of frost to the snow and have her take off her outer robes to run around the streets. She'd definitely attract more onlookers. This time, Han Yunshi was dead for sure. Seeing Han Yunshi emerge, Lady Su was surprised. She'd been waiting this entire time to see Han Yunshi, but who knew that Han Yunshi still hadn't shown up even after 10 days had passed. Of course she'd planned to spread the news all over the city and ruin Han Yunshi's reputation. Then she'd be unable to sit still. But Han Ruoxue had helped her thread the needle and hooked up with Mu Luiyue and Murong Wanru to give her this idea. She even promised that if she wanted to get the storehouse key immediately, she'd have to make a scene at the gates. Moreover, she'd have to splash dirty water on Grand Concubine E to be more effective. Lady Su didn't dare to do such a thing, but Murong Wanru and Mu Luiyue both swore to keep her safe. Chapter 126. It was perfectly normal for Murong Wanru to make things difficult for Han Yunshi. As for Mu Luiyue, Lady Su had heard from Han Ruoxue that Han Yunshi and Mu Luiyue had made a bet, but she wasn't clear on the specifics. With these 2 noble young misses as her guarantor, Lady Su dared to make a scene without restraint. After all, she came from a rich and influential family. Despite the ruckus, Lady Su still bowed respectfully when Grand Concubine E and the rest emerged. This commoner woman, Lady Su of the Han family, greets Grand Concubine Yi and Qin Wangfei. Grand Concubine Yi wished she could send this shrew flying with a kick, but she held back her anger and maintained her composure. She looked down disdainfully from her lofty position and asked, "Lady Su, you gathered a crowd to cause trouble in front of the Duke of Qin's gates. Do you know your crimes?" Hearing Grand Concubine Yi's question, Lady Su immediately fell to her knees. Her movements were so large that they made a loud thud, especially loud in the silence. "I'm wrongly accused." Grand Concubine Yi, this commoner had nowhere else to go and no one to redress her grievances. "That's why I impatiently came to the Duke of Qin's gates to ask for help. This commoner didn't do it on purpose." Lady Su cried out loudly. At her words, the other old women all fell to their knees and began to beg, asking for help. These shrews were clearly slandering her with malicious words. They'd incited the crowd, but this was asking for help. "Lady Su, just then you clearly," Han Yunshi was about to retort when Grand Concubine Yi cut her off. "What are you asking for? Did you have to come to my Duke of Qin's gates to beg?" Everyone around them was astonished by her words. Many of them began to whisper amongst themselves. Did Grand Concubine Yi still not know what Lady Su was doing here? In that case, everyone had misunderstood her. It looked like the fight over her family's assets was Han Yunshi's problem alone. At this moment, a cold smile flashed through Murong Wanru's eyes. She hurriedly opened her mouth without the arrogance of a noble lady. Instead, she was amiable and amiable. "Madam Su, you're not an unreasonable person. You must have something important to come to the prince's estate and make a ruckus. Since you're already here, then say it. My lady mother will certainly uphold justice for you." Hearing Murong Wanru's words, everyone was even more convinced that Grand Concubine Yi wasn't the mastermind behind Han Yunshi's actions. Murong Wanru had also washed away all suspicions of herself. It seemed like Han Yunshi was the only one who'd made the mistake. Neither Grand Concubine Yi nor Murong Wanru knew anything. As Murong Wanru spoke, she cast a few meaningful glances into the crowd, and someone immediately shouted. Grand Concubine Yi, Lady Su came for the sake of the Han family's assets. You must handle this impartially. Grand Concubine Yi, I've long heard that you're a fair and just person who's received praise from the late emperor. Today, you have to uphold justice for Lady Su. Grand Concubine Yi didn't send Lady Su flying as soon as she stepped out of the door. Instead, she held back her anger and asked Lady Su why she was crying out for injustice. This was the result she wanted. The Han family matters weren't important. What was important was her reputation and innocence. No matter what, she had to clear herself of all suspicions first. Murong Wanru's words, combined with the flattery from the crowd, immediately elevated Grand Concubine Yi's image. Her anger towards Lady Su finally subsided a little. After winning the approval of the people, Grand Concubine Yi had to start handling matters impartially. The Han family's assets. What's going on? She asked despite knowing the answer. Madam Su hurriedly replied, Imperial Concubine Dowager, our Han family has a storehouse key. The person who has the storehouse key will be the head of the Han family and will be in charge of all the Han family's properties, including the Han family's most precious medical books. My family's old master was unfortunate enough to be imprisoned, so the storehouse key was supposed to be passed on to the young master for safekeeping. The key is with the old master, but this commoner and a few of my sisters have wanted to visit the justice courts to discuss the matter of setting up a new head of house. But we couldn't. The justice court said that there was someone above who wouldn't let us see the old master. At this, Murong Wanru cut in with an angry face. Why? Even if it's an imprisoned prisoner, they can still request to see him once or twice a year. Who's up there, to bend the law and abuse their power like this? Murong Wanru's words cleared away any suspicions the people had against Grand Concubine Yi. Striking while the iron was hot, Grand Concubine Yi asked sternly, "Speak, who is it?" Lady Su lowered her head, deliberately hesitating. "This commoner doesn't know, but what? Speak as much as you want. I'll make a decision for you." Grand Concubine Yi said with awe-inspiring righteousness. Lady Su raised her head to look at Han Yunshi before speaking timidly. "This commoner doesn't know who it is, but the Han family storehouse key is. It's." Everyone fell silent at her words, even holding their breaths as they waited for Lady Su to give up Han Yunshi. After all, the law couldn't punish the masses. With the Duke of Qin's gates shut, everyone gathered together and dared to talk without restraint. But now that Grand Concubine Yi and Qin Wangfei were standing by the gates, no one dared to gossip. It would take some courage to identify her in front of Qin Wangfei's face. Following Lady Su's gaze, Grand Concubine Yi slowly looked towards Han Yunshi and asked hypocritically, "What, could it be that the Han family's key is in Qin Wangfei's hands?" Lady Su hastened to explain. To reply, "Esteemed imperial concubine, my Han family storehouse key really is in Qin Wangfei's hands." This commoner asked for the key again and again, but Qin Wangfei wouldn't give it to me. She said that the key was given to her by Old Master. She agreed to bring the young masters of the Han family to see Old Master yesterday. However, everyone in the Han family waited for her for an entire day yesterday, but she did not appear. This humble woman also did not see her when I came to the manor yesterday. This humble woman only came here as a last resort. As she spoke, she fell to her knees and cried, "Esteemed imperial concubine Yi, this commoner doesn't have the guts to cause trouble. This commoner was wrongly accused and has her own difficulties. I beg esteemed imperial concubine Yi to uphold justice for the Han family. This commoner just wants to see my old master, that's all." Grand Concubine Yi raised a hand to silence Lady Su before turning cold eyes towards Han Yunshi. "Han Yunshi, is everything Lady Su said true?" "It's true. Not a single word false," Han Yunshi admitted openly. Everyone sucked in a cold breath at her words. They never expected her to admit it so easily. Han Yunshi's mouth twitched. Everything Lady Su said was the truth, so how could she lie? "Lady Su, this Wangfei caught a cold these past few days and has been bedridden. I was late by a day, but you don't trust this Wangfei that much?" Han Yunshi retorted. Now that these people were done with their drama, it was her turn to speak, right? Lady Su was quick to defend herself, but Han Yunshi beat her to it. She said scornfully, "Isn't it just a day late? This Wangfei didn't say I wouldn't take you. Lady Su, did you have to make a scene at the gates? Don't think that Mufei and I didn't hear everything you said just then. I'm telling you, we heard everything loud and clear." These words, incredible. Han Yunshi's words betrayed Grand Concubine Yi. So she'd heard everything just then. In a flash, the crowd fell into an uproar. They never thought things would turn out like this. Grand Concubine Yi knew the truth, but she still interrogated her like that. Wasn't this too fake? Just what kind of trick was hidden in all this? Lady Su never thought that Han Yunshi would dare to drag Grand Concubine Yi into the water in front of everyone. She gaped, speechless for a moment. Murong Wanru gave a start as well. She couldn't see through her. Wasn't Han Yunshi very smart? Didn't she know that offending Mufei like this would lead to a tragic end? Was she going to take Lady Su down with her? Thinking up to here, Murong Wanru grew fearful. If Lady Su couldn't get any benefits, she'd definitely sell her out. Heavens, too frightening. Amidst the uproar, Grand Concubine Yi's expression was as frightening as it could be. Her sinister gaze seemed ready to swallow Han Yunshi whole. She'd worked so hard to salvage her image, but now it was ruined even more thoroughly. While the crowd was still in disbelief, Han Yunxi raised her voice again. Lady Su, my Mufei is a Buddhist. She's always been tolerant and merciful. She heard everything, but pretended not to hear a thing. She didn't bicker with you, but listened to you complain. However, I won't let this matter rest. Some people's words wouldn't be listened to, but others could turn things around with a single sentence. Han Yunxi's words miraculously changed the entire situation. In an instant, she'd whitewashed Grand Concubine Yi's name and flattered her in passing. Grand Concubine Yi composed herself, her mind a little blank. But at last, she exhaled in relief. Thank goodness Han Yunxi's words had left her a way out. Otherwise, she wouldn't know how to smooth things over today. Lady Su was scared witless. She never thought that Han Yunxi would be so formidable. She retreated in order to advance, using this method to rope in Grand Concubine Yi. Murong Wanru realized Han Yunxi's intentions in hindsight as well. She asked curiously, Sister-in-law, didn't they say that the higher-ups wouldn't let the Han family visit the prisons? How could you take them to the justice courts to see divine Dr. Han? How did you get them? Right now, Murong Wanru's expression was so innocent, but she'd grasped the crux of the matter. Her words were so pleasant to the ears, but even an idiot could tell that she was questioning Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was the higher-ups. How was Han Yunxi supposed to reply? She really had ordered the justice courts to forbid the Han family from visiting the prisons, but that was because of Han Kongan's instructions. She didn't know what kind of child Han Yuni was, so she didn't want the Han family to know of Han Kongan's choice too early. But after she understood Han Yuni, she wasn't afraid of the Han family visiting him, because she and Han Kongan both favored Han Yuni. However, no one would believe her when she said this reason. Han Yunxi didn't even think before she said, indeed, it was this Wang Fei who forbade the Han family from visiting the prisons. But this wasn't my idea, but my father's. She couldn't explain it clearly, so she simply pushed everything to Han Kongan. Since Han Kongan wanted her to support Han Yuni and revive the Han family, he would definitely stand on her side. Han Yunxi was quite confident in her answers to such a crucial question. But who knew that as soon as she finished speaking, Madame Su anxiously asked, Why? Why did old master do this? Esteemed Wang Fei, you're a married daughter. You shouldn't interfere in the Han family's affairs, right? Although Madame Su spoke tactfully, her tone was full of suspicion. Han Yunxi didn't mind and answered truthfully, because father committed a serious crime and let the Han family's ancestors down. He didn't have the face to face the entire Han family. That day when I went to visit him, he was worried that the Han family's young master was either mediocre, ignorant, and incompetent, or too young to be the head of the household. So he handed the storehouse key to me for temporary safekeeping until there's a candidate for the head of the household. After she finished speaking, Madame Su laughed. Chapter 127. Esteemed Wang Fei, the old master would never do such a thing. How could that be possible? Ask everyone which family would allow a married daughter to return to her maternal family to take care of matters. Lady Su laughed coldly as she retorted Han Yunxi. The crowd began to discuss the matter as well. Lady Su looked towards Grand Concubine Yi and asked, Esteemed Imperial Concubine, do you believe such an excuse? Lady Su, what do you mean? Are you doubting this Wang Fei? Han Yunxi demanded angrily. Yes. Lady Su threw caution to the wind. Now that things had gotten to this point, she had no choice but to throw caution to the wind. Otherwise, this farce would not only fail to achieve her goals, but also bolster Han Yunxi's reputation. No matter what, she not only had to get the storehouse key today, but see the old master as well. Once the truth was out, Han Yunxi's reputation would be ruined. Lady Su not only answered Han Yunxi's question, but repeated it again. Grand Concubine Yi, do you believe it? In front of everyone, she was forcing Grand Concubine Yi to answer even if she didn't want to. After all, Grand Concubine Yi's status was special. Her reaction to such a question could cause 1,000 ripples. She didn't like Lady Su at all. Han Yunxi had flattered her just then, but at a time like this, she was more willing to stand by Lady Su's side. If Han Yunxi really interfered with her maternal family's affairs for no reason and coveted her family's property, then this crime was no small matter. It was a perfect excuse for the Duke of Qin to divorce her. Grand Concubine Yi looked at Han Yunxi, then at Lady Su, feigning hesitation. She didn't answer for a long time while the crowd watched and waited. Grand Concubine Yi's hesitation was detrimental to Han Yunxi. It would only increase the crowd's suspicions. Murong Wanru was still standing by Grand Concubine Yi's side, looking as frail as ever, lovely and harmless. She took Grand Concubine Yi's arm and purposely lowered her voice. Mu Fei, I think this matter should end here. Forget it, it's the Han family's business, after all. We'll just have sister-in-law return the storehouse key. Although she lowered her voice, it was only a little. It was obvious that she wanted everyone around to hear her. It would have been better if she hadn't said anything. Now that she said it, Han Yunxi was even more suspicious. If she just let it go, wouldn't it mean that Han Yunxi was guilty and afraid? The originally quiet surroundings immediately began to whisper. Han Yunxi saw everything and sneered inwardly. Was Murong Wanru trying to goad her? Very well, she would beat him at his own game today. Before Grand Concubine Yi could speak, Han Yunxi spoke up. Mu Fei, it's no use even if you believe me. They've already made a ruckus at the gates. I promised her that I would take her to see my father, so let's go now. While you're at it, call the other members of the Han family as well. No one expected Han Yunxi to be so decisive, especially Madame Su. When Han Yunxi said she'd come in 10 days, she didn't believe Han Yunxi at all. She felt that Han Yunxi was just stalling for time, and when she didn't see her yesterday, she was even more certain that Han Yunxi was lying. Who knew that she'd dare to go to the justice courts in front of so many people? Could it be that she had a way to suppress this matter in the Supreme Court? Madame Su had asked her father multiple times to make an exception and let her see Han Yunxi in secret, but the justice courts hadn't agreed. It was obvious that they feared Han Yunxi. Thinking up to here, Madame Su didn't dare to underestimate her enemy. She hastened to say, "Esteemed imperial concubine, this commoner may be so bold as to ask you to come with me." What, you're worried that I'll do something to you? Han Yunxi laughed coldly. Madame Su didn't hold back, but mocked back. If Qin Wangfei can block my Han family's way to visit the prisons, what else can't she do in the justice courts? No matter how many privileges Han Yunxi had in the justice courts, as long as she invited Grand Concubine Yi over, Madame Su refused to believe that Han Yunxi could hide the truth from the masses. Madame Su, be more polite with your words for this Wangfei. Han Yunxi pretended to be angry. Seeing this, Grand Concubine Yi assumed that she was lacking in confidence and nodded in agreement. All right, for the sake of justice, I'll go with you. Hearing this, cheers rose from all around. Esteemed imperial concubine, you have to give the Han family justice. The Han family can't fall into the hands of outsiders. Esteemed imperial concubine, I trust that you'll handle this matter impartially and have Qin Wangfei give an explanation. Let's go, we'll wait by the justice court's gates. The truth will come out soon enough. We can't wrong good people, but we can't let those shameless people off either. These words came from different directions, full of incitement. The speakers were all hidden in the crowd, so it was obvious that someone had arranged this beforehand. Anyone would lose their temper if they heard such harsh words, but Han Yunshi wasn't angry. Nobody knew that she was looking forward to the truth even more than Madame Su. Grand Concubine Yi ordered a carriage to be prepared on the spot. Together with Han Yunshi and Madame Su, she headed for the Justice Court's prisons. With Grand Concubine Yi's personal arrival, the newly appointed Justice Court's official Ouyang, hastened to greet them at the gates. Hearing that Grand Concubine Yi was here for the Han family, official Ouyang's heart grew uneasy. On one side was the Crown Prince's lifesaver, Qin Wangfei, while on the other was his benefactor, Minister Su's daughter. He never expected Madame Su to really cause a ruckus. Now he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Grand Concubine Yi had a golden body. How could she casually walk into the filthy prisons of the imperial prisons? Official Ouyang welcomed them to the Supreme Court's office lobby and ordered the attendants to escort Han Kongan here. Grand Concubine Yi sat on the high seat of honor while official Ouyang sat on her left. Han Yunshi and Murong Wanru sat on her right, while Madame Su stood by herself. Before Han Kongan was brought in, the Han family had already heard the news and hurried over. Eldest young Master Han Yuchi, third Madam Li and second young Miss Han Ruoxue from the third branch, as well as seventh Madam and Han Yuni from the seventh branch. After making their greetings, Grand Concubine Yi didn't give them a seat, but everyone stood to one side. Han Yuchi's injury on his butt had already healed, but he still looked like a brainless young man with a full head and belly. He seemed to have a card up his sleeve for today's events and retreated to one side to whisper in Madame Su's ear. He didn't forget to shoot Han Yunshi a warning look. Han Yunshi was too lazy to argue with an idiot. She looked towards 7th Madam and little Yi. It was obvious that the mother and son pair had never seen such a grand scene before, especially 7th Madam, who stood timidly at the very back, holding tightly onto little Yi, as she curled up like a little wife. Of the group, 3rd Madam Li and her daughter were the most appropriate. They were neither servile nor overbearing as they waited quietly with their heads bowed. Han Yunshi secretly sized up 3rd Madam Li, recalling the masked female assassin called Qingyi. She only felt that they were all about the same height, short, fat, and thin. The more she looked, the more convinced she became that Madam Li was the assassin. Of course, intuition couldn't be used as evidence. They could only arrest the culprit after the tea leaves were found. Han Yunshi pondered as she sized up second young Miss Han Ruoxue. Han Ruoxue was a very important suspect to begin with. Now that the tea leaves had appeared, Han Yunshi was even more certain that she was the culprit. The 10,000 snake poison should have been delivered from this second young miss to Mu Liuyue's hands, then to the general's estate. But did Han Ruoxue know the poison arts as well? Did she know martial arts? That young female assassin called He Sha didn't resemble Han Ruoxue at all. Just then, there had been such a huge commotion outside the Duke of Qin's estate, but Long Fei Yi hadn't come out. Han Yunshi naturally didn't expect him to save the day, but she was curious as to what he was doing right now. By now, Chu Shifink should have delivered the report on the tea leaves to Long Fei Yi, right? Once it was confirmed to be poisoned, they could quickly arrest the culprit with Bai Lu as a witness. Now that they were in the capital, it would be difficult for Qingyi to escape from Long Fei Ye's clutches no matter how skilled she was. Han Yunshi dearly wanted to uncover the truth and ferret out the true culprit. She was silently waiting for Long Fei Yi to make his move. Of course, Han Yunshi wouldn't beat the grass and startle 3rd Madam in the Justice Court's courtroom. In any case, there were still 3 days until the bet. She could focus wholeheartedly on solving the problem in front of her. There was some distance between the imperial prisons and the main hall, so they had to wait a while. To everyone present, the wait felt like an eternity. Silence reigned in the room. Suddenly, Han Yunshi spoke up. "Someone come, give the Han family's 7th young master a seat." Everyone in the Han family looked over at her at these words. The retainer on the side was in a difficult position. He glanced at Grand Concubine Yi, then at official Ouyang, unsure whether to give him a seat. After all, Grand Concubine Yi had the highest status. She hadn't even given him a seat just then, so it wasn't appropriate for Qin Wangfei to do so now, was it? Seeing Grand Concubine Yi remain silent, official Ouyang was in a difficult position as well. He didn't know what to do, so the retainer didn't move. Official Ouyang, the people here have quite the airs. They can't even order this Wangfei around. Han Yunshi asked unhappily. Official Ouyang looked at Grand Concubine Yi again, but she still didn't move. Without a choice, he could only scold the retainer. Are you an idiot? Didn't you hear esteemed Wangfei's orders? Hurry up and give him a seat. With all the gods present, it was hard to serve them. The retainer was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. Not daring to delay, he quickly brought over a chair for little Yi. Little Yi secretly rejoiced as he struggled free of his mother's hand. He stepped forward and made a proper bow with hands clasped in front. Thanks to Grand Concubine Yi, thanks to esteemed Wangfei. Only then did Grand Concubine Yi glance over. She didn't pay them any mind, but drank her tea and flipped through the trial documents on the table with interest. Dispense with the formalities, sit. Han Yunshi's voice softened a few notches. Little Yi was good, he didn't lose face for her. Little Yi sat down openly. There were so many people in the Han family, but he was the only one sitting. Moreover, he was a concubine-born junior. In this world of strict hierarchy, this was a slap to everyone else's face. Han Yuchi immediately lowered his voice. Mother, what does Han Yunshi mean by this? She's going too far. Didn't you say that Grand Concubine Yi was on our side? Lady Su was angry as well, shooting looks at Murong Wanru. When Murong Wanru glared back, Lady Su looked over again, exchanging flirtatious glances. If this went on, someone would definitely pick up on the clues. Murong Wanru was extremely displeased, but she couldn't reprimand her. She could only comply with Lady Su's wishes. Mufei, how can you let the child sit while the elders are all standing? As I see it, they should all be given a seat, Murong Wanru said. Only now did Grand Concubine Yi lazily lift her head to look over. She only swept her eyes over the Han family without a word. Grand Concubine Yi seemed to have come to the justice courts to uphold justice for the Han family, but she was actually here for Han Yunshi. She didn't put the Han family in her eyes at all. Ever since they'd entered the court, she hadn't even spared them a glance. Chapter 128. Lady Su had caused such a ruckus at her gates. Although she'd saved her reputation and image in the end, that didn't mean she didn't mind. It was already good enough that she didn't make things difficult for Lady Su. How could she still give her a seat? Grand Concubine Yi glanced at her before her thoughts returned to the scroll. Seeing this, Lady Su never expected Grand Concubine Yi's attitude to be so cold as soon as they arrived at the justice courts. She was both shocked and angry as she shot Murong Wanru a questioning look. This Lady Su, do you still care about a seat at a time like this? Murong Wanru was flustered and gave Lady Su another glare as a warning. But Han Yunshi saw all of their flirtatious glances. Han Yunshi slowly narrowed her eyes. Fine, it's Murong Wanru again. That lingering soul, she won't cry until she sees the coffin. Today, she'd definitely make her understand the taste of regret. At this moment, a guard came in to announce, reporting, prisoner Hong Kongan has arrived. Hearing this, everyone in the room focused 120%. Seats didn't matter anymore. Grand Concubine Yi straightened in her seat and grew serious. Cold, she said, bring him in. Hong Kongin had no idea what had happened, nor who wanted to see him. He only heard that they were coming to the main hall, so he guessed that they had to be someone of high status. But besides Han Yunqi, he couldn't think of anyone else who would remember him and be willing to see him. But when Han Yunqi wanted to see him, she always went to the prison cells. Hong Kongin walked forward suspiciously and stepped over the high threshold. As soon as he saw the hall full of people, especially the familiar faces of the Han family, Hong Kongin froze in the doorway, gaping. What was going on? While he was still in a daze, little suddenly burst into tears and jumped off the high chair to throw himself over. Daddy! His cry of "Daddy" was so real and emotional. His childish voice wasn't affected at all, nor was it fake. It was filled with longing and dependence. Even the most hard-hearted person would be moved by it. Nothing could surpass the heart of a pure child, right? Little threw himself into his father's arms and burst into tears. Daddy, when are you coming home? Boo-hoo. I miss you. When will you come home? No matter how smart and precocious was, he was still a child. Little had heard many people say that his father had been sentenced to life imprisonment and would never be able to return home, but he stubbornly refused to believe it. He was still waiting for his father to return home and teach him how to recognize medicine and treat illnesses. Hong Kongin's prison clothes were ragged, his long hair was messy, and he was in a sorry state. He looked at his youngest son in his arms, and his sunken eyes couldn't help but redden. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to answer his son's question. Han Yunqi saw this scene. For the first time, she, who had always been clear about love and hate, felt guilty towards Hong Kongin. No, to be exact, this guilt was for She secretly made up her mind that no matter what, she would protect and make sure he grew up safely and smoothly. At this moment, Han Yuqi suddenly cried out, "Father," and threw himself over, with Han Ruoshua close behind. Grand concubine had been moved by little Er's tender and true feelings, but as soon as she saw Han Yuqi and Han Ruoshua's hypocritical behavior, she grew angry and impatient. Today, I came to uphold justice for the Han family, not to see you reunite as a family. At these words, Han Yuqi and Han Ruoshua were both frightened and immediately backed away. Little however, clung to his father with a death grip, afraid that he'd be taken away again. "Seventh Madam, hurry and pull your son away. What kind of propriety is this in front of Grand Concubine?" Lady Su scolded unhappily. The old master had already been imprisoned forever, so there was no point in trying to win his favor. In any case, the old master wouldn't be stupid enough to give the storehouse key to a married daughter. No matter who the old master gave the key to, she had ways to get it back for her son. Right now, the most important thing was to take the storehouse key back from Han Yunqi's hands. On one side, Seventh Madam saw the old master and gave a start. Her eyes grew wet, but Lady Sue's reminder brought her back to her senses. She quickly went forward to tug at little Be good, Esteemed imperial concubines angry. Don't harm your father. Seventh Madam always knew how to coax little At her words, little was so frightened that he immediately let go. Seventh Madam quickly picked him up and retreated to one side, not daring to sit in her original chair. Hong Kongin looked at the timid Seventh Madam helplessly. He wanted to say something, but stopped himself. If Seventh Madam was a bit stronger, he wouldn't need to beg Han Yunqi so painstakingly. Hong Kongin could be considered a man of character. He sorted out his emotions and immediately stepped forward to pay his respects. Sinner Hong Kongin greets esteemed imperial concubine and esteemed Wang Fei. Han Kongan, Lady Su of your estate has caused a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's gates for the sake of the Han family storehouse key. I'm asking you now, where is the Han family storehouse key? Grand Concubine Yi asked impatiently. As soon as he heard the words, storehouse key, the intelligent Han Kongan immediately understood what was going on. He had given the storehouse key to Han Yunshi for the sole purpose of guarding against Lady Su. Lady Su's maternal family had powerful backing. Once he left, the Han family would fall under Lady Su's rule. This was understandable, but eldest young master had failed to live up to expectations. If the Han family fell into Lady Su's hands, it was the same as falling into eldest young master's hands. With eldest young master's personality, he'd definitely lose everything in the Han family within 3 years. Han Kongan's gaze suddenly turned cold and deep as he looked towards Lady Su. Lady Su's heart gave a start as she grew inexplicably uneasy. She quickly said, "Old master, why aren't you answering Grand Concubine Yi's question?" Han Kongan didn't speak, but his cold gaze shifted to Han Yuchi. Caught off guard, Han Yuchi blurted out, "Father, Han Yunshi said you gave her the storehouse key. How is that possible? She was the one who stole it, right? That's right, that's right. Old master, we've invited Grand Concubine Yi here. You don't have to fear Han Yunshi. Just what's going on, tell us," Lady Su said urgently. By now, Han Ruoshue had lost her patience as well. She urged, "Father, how could you give the storehouse key to a married-off daughter? You must have suffered a lot in prison, right? Your daughter has been bending the rules all these days, but I still haven't seen you. Just what happened? Tell us." Grand Concubine Yi has to uphold justice for our Han family. The Han family was anxious, but so was Grand Concubine Yi. She asked again, "Han Kongan, Han Yunshi said you were the one who gave her the storehouse key. Is that true?" As soon as Grand Concubine Yi finished, Murong Wanru hastened to add, "Han Kongan, since my Mufei came today, you can say whatever you want. Don't hide anything. Did you give the storehouse key to Qin Wangfei willingly?" Little Yi and 7th Madam watched and listened from the sidelines, their hands clenched tightly as their hearts burned with impatience. After all, their father's answer would directly affect their fates. Finally, under the urging of the crowd, Han Kongan calmly looked towards Grand Concubine Yi. Now everyone had quieted down, holding their breaths as they waited for him to speak. Just how would he answer? Lady Su couldn't help but press a hand to her chest, her heart thumping in excitement. As long as the old master denied it, Han Yunshi would be done for. Murong Wanru darted a glance at Lady Su, very satisfied. She was also waiting for Han Kongan to announce Han Yunshi's crimes. But Han Kongan's lips curved into a faint smile that seemed both helpless and self-mocking. No one understood what he meant. It was then that he said, "To reply, esteemed imperial concubine, this criminal willingly gave the storehouse key to the Han family's daughter of the first wife, Qin Wangfei's." What? His calm words were like a pebble that stirred up 1,000 ripples in the silent hall. No. Impossible. Lady Su shouted in alarm. "Father, have you gone senile? What are you talking about?" Han Yuchi couldn't believe it. He fiercely walked up to Han Kongan. If Han Kongan wasn't his father, he probably would have made a move long ago. "Father, it must be Qin Wangfei who forced you, right? You have your own difficulties, don't you?" "Father, Grand Concubine Yi said she'd uphold justice for us." Han Ruoshue was anxious as well. Even though 3rd Madam Li tugged at her, she ignored her and continued agitatedly, "Father, you don't have to be afraid of anything. How did Qin Wangfei threaten you? Speak. Say it." Han Yunshi watched cold, her gaze passing over 3rd Madam's hand that was tugging at Han Ruoshue's robes. She didn't bat an eyelid. Besides third madam and seventh madam, the rest of the Han family surrounded Han Kongan, asking him questions one after another. It was more like they were interrogating him. Grand concubine each shook her head in disbelief, unable to believe that Han Kongan would say such things. Han Kongan had no reason to do this. Leaving aside the fact that Han Yunshi was a married daughter, even Han Kongan's imprisonment had something to do with Han Yunshi. To put it bluntly, Han Kongan's imprisonment was all thanks to Han Yunshi. Han Kongan hated Han Yunshi more than anything, so how could he entrust her with the storehouse key and the future of the Han family? Mu Fei, I think there must be something hidden here. Murong Wanru finally couldn't hold herself back. It was rare for her to speak so directly. Han Yunshi gave her a meaningful look, a cold smile rising to her lips. It was hard to tell whether she was smiling or not. Murong Wanru's heart gave a lurch as she felt uneasy. Han Yunshi was smiling at her like that. Did she suspect something? No. She had kept Lady Su's visit to the Han estate a secret. Besides Lady Su, no one else would know what ideas she'd given her. Han Kongan, if there's anything hidden, just say it. I'll make the decision for you. Grand concubine Yi was very direct. If she still couldn't deal with Han Yunshi at this point, then wouldn't she have come for nothing today? But Han Kongan was serious. Esteemed imperial concubine, this is a matter of the Han family. This guilty official chose to give the key to esteemed Wang Fei for safekeeping because this guilty official had his own considerations. Before he could finish, Han Yuchi cut him off angrily. I think you've gone senile. Whatever considerations you have, it has nothing to do with Han Yunshi. She's already married off. Unfilial son. Han Kongan immediately scolded, his voice angry. Old man might be in prison, but he's not dead yet. He's still the head of the Han family and has the right to decide who the storehouse key belongs to, as well as who the next head of the Han family is. Han Yuchi didn't care so much. As he saw it, this father of his was already useless. He was about to curse when Lady Su held him back, afraid that her rash son would ruin everything. Chapter 129. Han Kongan glared angrily at Han Yuchi before continuing to speak to Grand Concubine Yi. Eldest young master is ignorant and incompetent, a hedonistic wastrel. The other young masters are slow-witted and ran away from the Han family in times of crisis. Seventh young master is naturally intelligent, but he's still young. There's no one in the Han family who can inherit the position of head of house, so this guilty official has decided to give the key to Qin Wangfei, the only married woman of the Han family, for safekeeping. Father, there's still me. I don't want to marry, I just want to learn the Han family's medical skills. Han Ruoxue was so anxious that she was about to cry. She had the best natural talents, so why hadn't her father ever considered her? As soon as Han Yuchi heard his father curse him, he was about to lose his temper again, but Lady Su pinched him to stop him. Old master, how can you speak of Yuchi like that? He's your eldest son, oh. He's still young and playful, but he'll be sensible in a few more years, oh. Moreover, even if you don't choose a head of house now, you should at least give the key to me for safekeeping. I'm your wife, oh. But Han Kongan cleverly followed along with their words. Of course, he still looked at Grand Concubine Yi and reported, Grand Concubine Yi, you've seen the Han family situation as well. It's precisely because of this that this guilty official came up with this plan. I want to test the children for a few more years, but giving the key to Qin Wangfei is the fairest choice. Hearing this, Han Yunshi was amused. Han Kongan really was an old fox. He wasn't dead set on his words, but left no retort. But the silent Grand Concubine Yi suddenly broke into a cold laugh. Han Kongan, think it over carefully. Are you sure you're speaking the truth? If Qin Wangfei is forcing you, then speak up. Since I'm here today, I'll definitely uphold justice for you. As for the Han family's future development, I'll keep that in mind as well. At these words, Han Yunxi's heart lurched. Grand Concubine Yi's words were a bit too blunt. Grand Concubine Yi gave her a meaningful look, before sweeping her cold eyes over the Han family members. Then she continued, of course, if Qin Wangfei didn't force you and you did all of this willingly, I wouldn't interfere. However, this consort must remind you that your Han family has been crying injustice everywhere, slandering Qin Wangfei for coveting the Han family's assets and interfering in the Han family's affairs. You've caused a storm in the city, so even if Qin Wangfei doesn't bother with you, this consort will definitely not let you off easily. By the time Grand Concubine Yi finished speaking, the entire hall had grown so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. She seemed to be very satisfied with this silence. She calmly drank a cup of tea and continued, of course, if this consort finds out that you're lying today, this consort won't let you off. As soon as he finished speaking, he put down the teacup with a loud clang, which woke everyone up. Grand Concubine Yi's words were both a sign of goodwill and a warning. Leaving aside the Han family members, even Han Yunxi trembled with fear at her words. If Han Kongan admitted that he'd been forced to give the storehouse key to Han Yunxi, then Grand Concubine Yi would remember the Han family's future prospects in her heart. She'd do her best to revive the Han family. The warning couldn't be more obvious. If Han Kongan admitted that he hadn't been forced, then Lady Su, who'd caused a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's gates and framed Qin Wangfei, would be finished. Most of the people present were smart enough to understand Grand Concubine Yi's intentions, especially Han Kongan. He knew that since Grand Concubine Yi was here today, she'd uncover Han Yunxi's weakness no matter what the truth was. Grand Concubine Yi wanted him to admit that he'd been forced and slander Han Yunxi. How should he choose? That's right, how would Han Kongan choose? Everyone looked towards Han Kongan. Lady Su's face was ashen with fright. She was the one who'd caused a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's gates and caused a storm in the city. Once the old master chose Han Yunxi, then she'd be finished. Completely and utterly finished. Thinking up to here, Lady Su's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. No one spoke, but she was the first to speak up. Old master, you have to think clearly before you answer. At the same time, Han Yunxi was looking at Han Kongan with a grave gaze. It had to be said that she wasn't confident. Her agreement with Han Kongan was a gentleman's verbal agreement without any proof. As soon as Han Kongan slandered her, she'd never be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Actually, Han Kongan wasn't choosing her or Lady Su right now, but her or Grand Concubine Yi. Grand Concubine Yi had already spoken so plainly. She'd put the Han family's future development in her heart. Wasn't everything Han Kongan had done for the sake of the Han family's future? It was better to place the Han family's future in the hands of the powerful and resourceful Grand Concubine Yi rather than a powerless Qin Wangfei like her. At this time, Han Kongan could bite her back in order to curry favor with Grand Concubine Yi. What to do? Han Kongan, were you forced to do this, or did you do it willingly? This is the last time I'll ask you, Grand Concubine Yi reminded him loftily as she issued the final warrant for Han Kongan's arrest. Old master. You have to think clearly. Lady Su was on the verge of tears. Heaven knows how scared she was. Han Yunxi, who considered everyone beneath him and didn't know the depths of heaven and earth, grew nervous as well. Once his mother was punished, he'd be finished as well. He rushed to Han Kongan's side and knelt on one knee, shouting, "Father, hurry," and answered Grand Concubine Yi. You were forced. You were forced to do it. If Lady Su and her son's nervousness stemmed from a guilty conscience, then Han Ruoshua's nervousness was a kind of anticipation. She'd heard from Mu Luiyue that Han Yunxi and Mu Luiyue had a bet to find the true culprit behind the poisoning. If she lost in 3 days, she'd have to take off her outer robes and run around the streets. If she could delay Han Yunxi's investigation for 3 days because of the Han family matters, then Han Yunxi would lose without a doubt. Moreover, her comrade-in-arms relationship with Mu Luiyue would be one step closer. With Mu Luiyue's support, she could find a chance to climb up Princess Chongping. Then she wouldn't have to fear the power behind Lady Su. Thus, she introduced Mu Luiyue and Murong Wanru to Lady Su to facilitate this farce. Of course, her mother had no idea of these little schemes. She didn't ask for her mother's opinion, but rushed over to kneel with Han Yuqi, her voice full of emotion. "Father, the Han family's future is all in your hands." Grand Concubine Yi leisurely admired the Han family's nervousness without urging them. She seemed to be very confident in Han Konggen's choice. By her side, Murong Wanru wasn't worried about Han Konggen either, but knitted her brows at Lady Su. Her eyes flashed with disdain and a cold smile. For better or for worse, Lady Su had been married to Han Konggen for so many years. How could she not understand her husband? Grand Concubine Yi had thrown out such a good olive branch, so how could Han Konggen still choose Han Yunxi? His choice was already very obvious, so what was the point of being so nervous? Han Konggen looked at his son and daughter before him, his muddy old eyes drooping. It was impossible to see the color in his pupils, but he didn't speak for a long time. Seeing this, Han Yunxi grew even more uneasy. Leaving aside Han Konggen, even she would have chosen Grand Concubine Yi if she was in his shoes. She was in big trouble. She secretly took a deep breath, and at this moment, Han Konggen finally raised his head. Seeing this, everyone's heartbeat quickened. Was Han Konggen going to answer? So nervous. Han Yunxi had an idea in her heart, but she didn't want to give up before the results came out. She shot Han Konggen a questioning look, but he immediately avoided it to look at Grand Concubine Yi instead. What did Han Konggen mean by this? Han Yunxi couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Had he really made up his mind to slander her? Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Han Yunxi's heart raced uncontrollably. To reply, esteemed imperial concubine. Han Konggen began mildly. Now even Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru grew serious. They unconsciously sat up straight, anticipating Han Yunxi's conviction. But just as Han Konggen was about to say his choice, little Yi suddenly threw himself from his mother's side to fall heavily by Han Konggen's side. Han Konggen panicked and quickly turned to support him, but as soon as he picked up little Yi, he began to cry. "Daddy, Big Sister Yunxi's a good person. Big Sister Yunxi wouldn't force you, right?" Little Yi was still too young, so he didn't quite understand Grand Concubine Yi's words. He only knew that Big Sister Yunxi wouldn't lie. He was about to speak up when his weak mother suddenly pushed him out. With his mother's support, he was even bolder. He had to speak the words in his heart. "Father, don't slander Big Sister Yunxi, all right? Big brother bullied me. It was Big Sister Yunxi who saved me. She even sent people to protect me and mother." "Father, don't," little Yi's words angered Grand Concubine Yi. She suddenly raged, "Someone come, drag this child out. How can a child be allowed to cry in the main hall? What a scandal." This time, 7th Madam rushed over to take little Yi away, trembling with fear as she pleaded, "Esteemed imperial concubine, calm your anger, calm your anger. This child doesn't know any better. This commoner will cover his mouth right now so he won't make a sound. This commoner promises that he won't make a fuss again." As 7th Madam spoke, she hugged little Yi and covered his mouth with her other hand. She curled up into a ball, her fearful and timid appearance both pitiful and laughable. Grand Concubine Yi despised weak women like this to the bone. Cold as she glanced at her, she dismissed the attendants and didn't make things difficult for her. Han Yunxi watched, thinking that little Yi might be able to help her out. After all, Han Kongin doted on and favored this son the most. But now, looking at seventh concubine's pitiful appearance, she was truly in complete despair. But no one expected seventh madam to speak up after little Yi shut up. Old master, Yi and I both believe that you weren't forced. This choked voice was very, very soft. It sounded very timid and weak, but for some reason, it exuded an unusually firm strength. It was very inconceivable. It felt like what seventh concubine had said, but it also didn't seem like it. Han Yunxi looked over in astonishment. Based on her understanding of seventh madam, she couldn't believe that she'd say such things under these circumstances. Everyone else looked over in shock as well. They all said that the words of the lowly carried little weight, but seventh madam's words made them all uneasy. Even Grand Concubine Yi grew restless and said coldly, "Enough. Han Kongin, answer this concubine's question immediately." "Yes." Han Kongin's gaze shifted from seventh madam and her son to Grand Concubine Yi. He took a deep breath and stopped hesitating. To reply, esteemed imperial concubine, this commoner is. Chapter 130. Old Master, think clearly. Lady Su was so nervous that she couldn't help but interrupt again. As for Han Yunxi, she chose to close her eyes. She hated people who didn't keep their promises, and she hated betrayal. Even when she heard Lady Su's interruption, she didn't open her eyes. But this time, Han Kongin didn't hesitate, but replied decisively, "This commoner did it willingly." As soon as he said that, the whole place fell silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. It was as if they had been cursed and turned into statues in an instant, unable to move. Especially Madame Su, who was like a 1,000-year-old ice sculpture. She seemed to have stopped breathing. Only seventh concubine's timid little face revealed a trace of a gratified smile. It was faint and faint. "No. Old master, you can't do this. You can't." Lady Su, who'd been frozen the most, was the first to recover her wits. She threw herself over and tripped, crying and wailing. "Old master, how could you lie? How could you be so biased, so heartless? Lady Tianxin's already been dead for so many years, and Han Yunxi's already married off. Why are you doing this? Why? Old master, I compromised to marry you and stayed as a concubine for so many years without any complaints or regrets. How could you treat me like this? How could you? Old master, say something. Answer me. How could this be?" Han Ruoxue was so stunned that she felt like she'd been sucked dry. She kept shaking her head, her heart full of anticipation. But she never expected things to turn out like this. Mu Luiyue was still waiting at the door, waiting for the Han family to delay Han Yunxi for her. She was still waiting for the bet in 3 days. How was she supposed to explain things to Mu Luiyue now? Meanwhile, Han Yunxi looked at his crying mother and gradually recovered from his shock. He shoved Han Kongin aside and cried, "Father, you're lying. You were forced to do it, you were." Han Kongin was pushed to the ground, but his gaze was firm and even exuded the cruelty of placing righteousness before family. He crawled to his feet and faced Grand Concubine Yi, repeating himself. "Grand Concubine Yi, I did it willingly. Qin Wangfei didn't force me. The Han family's storehouse key will be temporarily kept by Qin Wangfei. The master of the Han family will also be chosen by Qin Wangfei in the future and will be decided through an examination. Grand Concubine Yi was so shocked that her face turned white. She was full of self-confidence, but never expected Han Kongan to refuse her advances and choose Han Yunxi instead. She unconsciously shook her head, unable to say anything for a long time. Who knew that at this time, Han Yunxi suddenly roared angrily, "I don't agree." Saying this, he raised his fist and punched at Han Kongan. "Stop!" Han Yunxi exclaimed. She couldn't care less and immediately rushed down to stop him. Unfortunately, she was too far away to make it in time. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, seventh concubine suddenly rushed over and stood in front of Han Kongan. Bam! With a loud bang, Han Yuqi's fist landed squarely on the back of seventh madam's head. Seventh madam only felt her entire brain shake violently. Her vision turned black, and she fainted on Han Chong-an's body. Seeing this, the irritable Han Yuqi finally calmed down and realized he'd caused trouble. Unfilial son. Han Kongan raged as he hugged seventh concubine, his hair standing on end in anger as his entire body trembled. Little was scared witless. After giving a start, he threw himself over and bawled, "Mother! Mother!" Han Yunxi arrived just in time to viciously grab Han Yuqi's hand and fling him to one side, her rage soaring to the skies. "Someone come, tie up Han Yuqi for this Wang Fei." Seeing Qin Wang Fei so angry, how could the bailiffs from the justice courts delay? How could they still bother with Grand Concubine Yi? Two bailiffs immediately came forward to seize Han Yuqi, who was scared witless and forgot to resist. Very soon, he was tied up. Han Yunxi anxiously examined seventh concubine's injuries, only to see that she'd already lost consciousness. The entire back of her head was swollen. Han Yunxi was a doctor of poisons, so she wasn't familiar with these kinds of injuries. Meanwhile, Han Kongan was scared witless as well. He'd forgotten that he was a doctor, a divine doctor at that. Looking at the unconscious seventh concubine, his face filled with heartache and fear. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. "Someone come, quick, take seventh concubine away and find a doctor. Quickly!" Han Yunxi shouted. A few servants rushed over to help carry seventh concubine out. Little was crying and shouting as he chased after them. Han Yunxi dearly wanted to follow, but the matters in the main hall weren't over yet. Madame Su and her son, if she didn't teach them a lesson today, she wouldn't be Han anymore. Everything happened too suddenly. Lady Su watched with trepidation until seventh concubine was taken out and Han Yuqi was tied up and forced to kneel on the ground. Only then did she recover her wits. She quickly fell to her knees and begged, "Esteemed imperial concubine, have mercy. Have mercy, ah. Yuqi is only young and ignorant. His personality is rash, but he definitely doesn't have the heart to do evil. Just let him go this time." Grand Concubine Yi had yet to recover from Han Kongan's choice before being frightened by Han Yuqi's actions. Right now, her face was ashen white as she looked at the people in the main hall, her breathing ragged. Chaos. Chaos. Victory had been within her grasp, but now it was completely out of her control. Her mind was a mess. "Madame Su, you still have the nerve to beg for mercy?" Han Yunxi retorted coldly. She couldn't believe that such a person existed. Han Yuqi is already 28 years old. He's no longer a 3-year-old child, but publicly committed violence in the main hall. He looked down on esteemed imperial concubine and ignored this Wang Fei. This is disrespect and audacity to the extreme. He attacked his father and hurt his concubine. This is unfilial and treacherous. What's the use of keeping such an unfilial and disrespectful beast? Faced with Han Yunxi's questions, Lady Su grew even more frightened as tears streamed down her face. She knew that begging Han Yunxi now was useless. Seeing that Grand Concubine Yi didn't react, she immediately looked towards Murong Wanru for help. Murong Wanru, Murong Wanru. You were the one who said this was foolproof. How did it turn out like this? You were the one who promised me that Grand Concubine Yi would stand by my side. Help me put in a good word, But Murong Wanru and Grand Concubine Yi were the same. Both of them had yet to recover from Han Konggan's attack and Han Yuqi's fright. Neither of them noticed Lady Su's obvious hints. Official Ouyang, tell me. How do you think Han Yuqi should be dealt with according to the law for committing such treason? Han Yunxi asked. The frightened official Ouyang hastily rose to his feet and looked between Grand Concubine Yi and Lady Su. Neither of them knew how to answer. Speak. Han Yunxi said angrily, her tone fierce. Official Ouyang was given a fright. How could he delay? He hastily replied. Committing a public assault in court, according to the law, should be sentenced to 3 years in prison. No. Han Yuqi suddenly roared like a wild beast, struggling like a madman. Fortunately, the Yamen runners held him firmly in place. His roar made the dazed Grand Concubine Yi back away. She'd never faced such a frightening scene before and was truly frightened. She didn't care who Han Yuqi was, but cried out, someone come. Hurry. Hurry and drag him out. Lock him up in the prisons. Too frightening, too disrespectful of the laws. As soon as esteemed imperial concubine spoke, the Yamen runners began to drag him out, but Lady Su threw herself at them to stop them. Esteemed imperial concubine, have mercy. Have mercy. Esteemed imperial concubine, I'm begging you. Lady Su, what right do you have to beg esteemed imperial concubine? Han Yunxi cut her off harshly. Lady Su gave a start, but didn't dare to answer Han Yunxi. She only kept pleading with Grand Concubine Yi. Esteemed imperial concubine, have mercy. Have mercy. Yuqi, he's only. But Han Yunxi cut her off again. Lady Su, you slandered this Wang Fei, caused a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's estate, and ruined its reputation. Do you know your crimes? This Lady Su, if she didn't remind her, she'd really forget that she was a clay bodhisattva crossing a river. She couldn't even protect herself. At these words, the agitated Lady Su suddenly calmed down. As expected, she'd forgotten her own situation. Her crimes were much worse than Han Yuqi's. She slowly turned to look at Han Yunxi, only to meet Han Yunxi's ruthless gaze. Her legs turned to jelly as she fell to the ground. The Yamen runners immediately dragged Han Yuqi out. Mother, save me. Save me. Mother, find grandfather to save me. I didn't do it on purpose. Mother. In the silence of the room, Han Yuqi's laughable cries for help were obvious and full of sarcasm. If his grandfather, the Minister of Appointments, knew of today's events, he wouldn't even be able to protect himself. How could he save them? Han Yuqi's crimes were his own. Lady Su's crimes were both serious and minor. If things went wrong, even the Minister of Appointments would be implicated. As Han Yuqi's cries for help grew distant, the large hall finally quieted down. Lady Su knelt on the ground, while Third Madame Li had long pulled the disgruntled Han Ruoxue far away. She didn't dare to make another sound. Meanwhile, Han Konggan knelt disheartenedly with his head bowed. Everything had finally calmed down, but it was precisely this calm that heralded the arrival of an even bigger storm. Han Yunxi took a deep breath and returned to her seat by Grand Concubine Yi's side. She straightened out her clothes and sat down. As long as Han Konggan didn't slander her and stood by her side, she wasn't afraid of anything. She looked towards Grand Concubine Yi and said word by word, Mu Fei, the truth has been revealed. How to deal with Lady Su, I ask you to make the decision. Grand Concubine Yi composed herself before slowly turning to look at Han Yunshi. She knew that she'd lost again. Han Yunshi was only a young girl without any backing or support. Why was she so hard to deal with? Why did Han Kongin leave the Han family's future in Han Yunshi's hands and refuse her good intentions? Could it be that she'd really underestimated Han Yunshi? For the first time, Grand Concubine Yi's heart wavered. But before she could speak, Murong Wanru spoke up. Mu Fei, I think this was all a misunderstanding. That's why things turned out like this. Even if Lady Su hadn't reminded her, Murong Wanru would have spoken up by now. To put it bluntly, she'd planned all of this from the start. Lady Su was simply giving her a chance. If she didn't do something, with Madame Su's personality, she would most likely give up and expose her. Then, she would be done for. It wasn't little sister Wanru who was slandered. Is it easy for little sister Wanru to speak while standing? Han Yunshi retorted with a cold smile. Murong Wanru grew anxious and stood up. Sister-in-law, don't say things like that. How could I mean that? I'm just thinking for your Han family, aren't I? After all, your family. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Han Yunshi sighed with emotion in her heart. This Murong Wanru was the epitome of a white lotus. But Han Yunshi had never been clumsy with words. She lazily retorted, little sister Wanru's words mean that the Duke of Qin's affairs aren't my family's affairs. Little sister Wanru doesn't consider me family. Chapter 131. Sister-in-law, that's not what I meant. The Han family is your maternal family, Murong Wanru was about to explain, but Han Yunshi didn't give her a chance. Little sister Wanru's right. The Han family is my maternal family, so these matters count as my family's affairs. But the Duke of Qin's estate is my husband's family. How could I favor my maternal family and harm my husband's family? Little sister Wanru, don't you think so? Murong Wanru quickly nodded. Of course, but, Han Yunshi cut her off again. I'm not even planning to side with my maternal family, so there's no need for little sister Wanru to give me face and plead leniency for my maternal family. Murong Wanru's face turned green at these words. She wanted to pretend to be kind and say that she was thinking for Han Yunshi's sake and pleading leniency for her maternal family. But before she could speak, Han Yunshi rejected her. Murong Wanru glanced down and saw Lady Su sitting there without moving. It wasn't clear whether she'd lost her wits or was listening to their conversation. This Lady Su really is troublesome. While Murong Wanru was at a loss, Han Yunshi continued. Of course, if little sister Wanru is pleading leniency for the sake of someone else instead of me, then I won't stop you. I'm not. Murong Wanru blurted out in a panic. Grand Concubine Yi wasn't an idiot. She didn't need to think too much to pick up on the clues. She knitted her brows as she looked towards Murong Wanru, who grew alarmed and sat back down. How would she dare to persuade her again? She hastened to explain. Since sister-in-law is so fair and impartial, then I won't say any more. As for how to handle things, it'll be up to Mu Fei to decide. Grand Concubine Yi had complete trust in Murong Wanru, so she didn't think much of it. One hand rested on the table while the other knitted her brows. Unexpectedly, Madame Su's eyes suddenly lit up. They were so bright that they seemed to be able to penetrate one's eyes and look into one's heart. At this moment, the person she was looking at was none other than Murong Wanru. Seeing this, the guilty Murong Wanru's heart skipped a beat as all the pores on her body stood on end. This Lady Su, what did she mean? What was she trying to do? Han Yunshi witnessed the entire scene. Today, she was going to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only was she going to prove to the entire capital that she had no intention of coveting the Han family's fortune, but she was also going to get rid of Madame Su and her son forever. Of course, more importantly, she was going to uncover the true culprit who instigated Madame Su to cause trouble. Murong Wanru, this time, you've finally fallen into my hands. Han Yunxi's lips curved into a crafty smile as she asked, Little sister Wanru, I can see that Mufei is vexed. Why don't you help Mufei think of a way to severely punish Lady Su as a warning to others? Severely punish Madame Su as a warning to others. Murong Wanru's inability to intercede for Madame Su had already made her feel guilty enough. Now, Han Yunxi had actually thrown such a question at her. This was the rhythm of pushing her into the fire pit. Madame Su's sharp gaze was as sharp as a knife. Murong Wanru didn't dare to look straight at her. She couldn't care less and hurriedly tried to persuade her. Sister-in-law, mother is a Buddhist and forgives people wherever possible. I think this matter is ultimately your maternal family's matter, and it's also a misunderstanding. Why don't, Sister Wanru, didn't I say that you don't need to give me face? Han Yunxi kindly reminded her. Sister-in-law, I know that you're a fair person, and I also know that your heart is with our family. It's not good for you to beg for mercy on behalf of your maternal family. How about this, today's matter? Before Murong Wanru could finish speaking, Han Yunxi laughed. Sister Wanru, how can you face mother when you're so partial to the Han family? It doesn't matter if Madame Su slanders me, but how can she cause a ruckus in front of the Duke of Qin's gate? This has caused an uproar in the city. Those who don't know might think that something happened to mother. As Han Yunxi spoke, she pretended to ponder. What did those rumors say before? Oh, that's right, they're all suspecting that someone bribed the justice courts and coveted the Han family's assets. How could I have the skills to bribe the justice courts? They're obviously suspecting mother. They even said something about the Han family storehouses. Those are truly rare items. At these words, Grand Concubine Yi, who'd been knitting her brows, immediately raised her head to shoot Han Yunxi a sharp look. Still, Han Yunxi wasn't afraid. Mufei, now that the truth is out, you don't have to give Qinqi a face. Lady Su's crimes are heinous, so she needs to be severely punished as a warning to others. Otherwise, who knows what kind of rumors will spread outside. Grand Concubine Yi had a belly full of fire for failing to catch Han Yunxi today. She was unreconciled, but she had to admit that Han Yunxi's words were very reasonable. She'd been pondering the same thing all this time. This matter had already caused an uproar in the city. How could she clean up the mess beautifully without leaving any evidence behind? She'd let Han Yunxi go because she had no choice. As for Madame Su, even if Han Yunxi didn't say anything, Grand Concubine Yi wouldn't let her off easily. She was trying to figure out how to deal with this matter so she could save her own face and convince the people waiting by the justice courts. After all, those people were just like her in the past. They all believed that Han Yunxi wanted to seize the Han family's assets. If she didn't figure out how to deal with this matter and threw out the results of her interrogation, it'd be hard to convince outsiders even if the matter was over. Those who didn't know better might even think that she and the Duke of Qin's men had tortured the Han family members in the justice courts. After all, Grand Concubine Yi had been in charge for years. Although her heart was unreconciled, she still had to calm down and consider all aspects at a time like this. Grand Concubine Yi stared at Han Yunxi for a long time without replying. If she did, it'd be admitting her failure to Han Yunxi. She hated this feeling too much. She looked towards Official Ouyang and said, Official Ouyang, now that the truth has been revealed, how should Madame Su be judged for slandering Qin Wangfei and insulting the Duke of Qin's reputation? In a flash, everyone looked towards Official Ouyang. Even Madame Su stared at him without a word. Cold eyes. On one side, Han Ruoshua's palms were covered in sweat. At this point, she knew that things were set in stone and there was no turning back. Once they cleared things up outside, wouldn't Mu Luiyue be disappointed when she saw this? No, she had to think carefully about what to say later. What's wrong? Why are your hands so sweaty? Madame Li asked in a low voice. It's nothing, I'm just angry. Father really shouldn't have, Han Ruoshue quickly replied. She didn't dare tell her mother that Mu Luiyue was outside, much less the bet between Han Yunxi and Mu Luiyue. After delivering the tea leaves, her mother had told her to stop interacting with Mu Luiyue. After all, Han Yunxi and Mu Luiyue weren't on good terms. She was still Han Yunxi's little sister, so she had to avoid her. In the room, Madame Su was the most taciturn. Murong Wanru couldn't help but feel her hair stand on end. She only felt that Madame Su was waiting for a result before exploding and taking her down with her. Murong Wanru clenched her fists, her back drenched in cold sweat. What should she do? Was there anything she could do to stop Madame Su? Official Ouyang didn't dare to look at Madame Su, but turned his head away and said awkwardly, according to the law, she should be beheaded. As soon as he said this, Madame Su, who had been kneeling all this time, suddenly stood up. Seeing this, Murong Wanru's entire body trembled. She couldn't hold it in anymore and stood up, crying out in alarm, Madame Su, what do you want to do? Second Madam, spreading rumors doesn't warrant death. I didn't expect that not only did you spread rumors, but you also caused a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's gate and incited the people. Have you gone senile? You actually did this kind of thing. Han Yunxi said coldly. These words sounded like a reprimand, but they were reminding Madame Su that spreading rumors didn't warrant death. She had been instigated and used by others to end up like this. Even a cornered dog would jump over a wall, let alone a person. Her son had already been imprisoned for 3 years, and she herself was facing the death penalty. There was no hope of becoming the head of the Han family. Madame Su had already reached the point where she had nothing left to lose. When a person was in a situation where they had nothing left to lose, what else would she care about? She was like a person who had fallen into water, pulling anyone down with her. As soon as Han Yunxi finished speaking, Madame Su looked coldly at Murong Wanru and suddenly stepped forward. Frightened, Murong Wanru shot forward to block Madame Su's way, looking like she wanted to protect Grand Concubine Yi. She said angrily, what do you want to do? You're impudent. If you disturb esteemed imperial concubine, your crimes are unforgivable. Madame Su backed up a step so she could see Murong Wanru's face more clearly. Gradually, she broke into a cold smile, her lips full of ridicule. This Murong Wanru had promised her in the past that even if Grand Concubine Eve got angry, she'd have ways to deal with it. Otherwise, how could she not know that causing trouble at the Duke of Qin's estate was the same as causing trouble at the imperial palace? That was a capital offense. Murong Wanru's back was to Grand Concubine Yi, her face filled with panic. She'd planned everything so well. Once she toppled Han Yunxi, Mu Fei would be in a good mood. Then she'd just have to say a few words of persuasion. Madame Su would have some merit as well, so she'd be fine. How could she know that Han Yunxi could reverse the situation and gain Hong Kongan support? Wanru, hurry over here. Someone come, seize Madame Su for me. Grand Concubine Yi was anxious, worried about Murong Wanru's safety. Han Yunxi watched coldly from the sidelines, waiting for Murong Wanru to sit back down obediently and for Madame Su to reveal everything. But as soon as the Yamen runners stepped forward, Madame Su suddenly drew close to Murong Wanru and grabbed her by the arm. She was about to curse when Murong Wanru said in a low voice, Madame Su, don't forget that you still have father. If you dare to expose me without any proof, my Mu Fei will never believe you. Moreover, I promise that your entire Su clan won't have a good ending. Madame Su gave a start at these words. That's right, she still had father and her brothers and sisters from her maternal family. Without any proof, if Grand Concubine Yi didn't believe her and Murong Wanru held a grudge, then the Su clan's future days would be miserable. Madame Su's hands stiffened before she immediately let go. Murong Wanru retreated like she was fleeing, her face pale with fright. She patted her chest a few times and took deep breaths. Outsiders all thought she'd been frightened by Madame Su, but she was rejoicing over the fact that she'd found a chance to warn Madame Su in time. Otherwise, she wouldn't know how to deal with the situation today. Although she had no proof, Mu Fei would definitely have her own thoughts. After all, she'd used Mu Fei's reputation as a stake this time. Just based on this point alone, Imperial Concubine Mother would definitely not forgive her. No matter what, she was still an adopted daughter. Seeing the Yamen runners take Madame Su into custody, Grand Concubine Yi exhaled in relief and stood up to wave at Murong Wanru. Wanru, come here, quick. Let Mu Fei take a look and see if you're hurt. Are you frightened? Chapter 132. Murong Wanru was already frightened to begin with. Now that she was exaggerating, it made her look even more real. Anyone who saw her would want to protect her. She hastily walked to Grand Concubine Yi's side with teary eyes. Mu Fei, I never thought she was too impudent. She scared me to death. So speaking, she began to sob. Grand Concubine Yi examined her arm and saw that it was only a scratch mark. She relaxed and pulled her into her arms to sit by her side. It's fine now, it's fine. Don't be scared. Right now, Han Yunxi had no time to watch Murong Wanru's act. She knitted her brows at Lady Su, only to see the woman's lifeless eyes filled with despair. What was going on? Lady Su was clearly about to explode, so why did she suddenly wilt? Just what had happened just then? Murong Wanru must have done something, or else Lady Su's personality wouldn't let it go so easily. Han Yunxi whipped her head towards Murong Wanru, only to see her like a frightened child as she nestled pitifully in Grand Concubine Yi's arms. It was obvious that Murong Wanru didn't care about Lady Su at all. She leaned against Grand Concubine Yi's shoulder with her eyes shut. Han Yunxi's temper flared at the sight as she clenched her fists. She didn't know what Murong Wanru had done, but judging from Lady Su's reaction, she must have been firmly grasped by Murong Wanru. Abominable. Lady Su was done for. This time, Murong Wanru had escaped calamity once again. Han Yunxi wasn't satisfied, but she had no proof. If Lady Su didn't testify, then she had no way to expose Murong Wanru. How stifling. This disgusting white lotus. She had to find a way to marry her off as soon as possible, or else she'd only have dreams if she stayed at home. Lady Su's actions infuriated Grand Concubine Yi even more. She raged, "Someone come, take this slut away. She'll be beheaded after the new year." Official Ouyang's features were scrunched up in a knot, but he didn't dare dissuade Grand Concubine Yi in the face of her rage. He immediately ordered the men to take her away. Madame Su didn't resist and didn't look at Murong Wanru and Han Yunxi again. Instead, she looked at Han Kongan, who was kneeling on the side and hadn't said a word. That gaze was as if it had been dipped in poison, filled with resentment and viciousness. That's right, the one she should really blame and hate wasn't anyone else, but Han Kongan. It was Han Kongan's choice that caused all of this. However, the sad thing was that Han Kongan did not look at her. He did not even know that she was looking at him with resentment. A day as husband and wife meant endless devotion for the rest of their lives. Han Kongan's heart was abnormally heavy, but he didn't regret it. Actually, even without little and seventh madam, he would have chosen Han Yunshi all the same. He could tell that Grand Concubine Yi was trying to get on his good side because she wanted to deal with Han Yunshi. Once she got rid of Han Yunshi, the Han family would be useless. How could Grand Concubine think highly of the Han family and support them? On the other hand, Han Yunshi was the one who could truly revive the Han family. Pure and untainted jade, Han Yunshi's medical skills were exquisite and her potential astonishing. He believed that as long as Han Yunshi's heart was with the Han family and she was willing to support the new head of house, the Han family would be able to regain a foothold in the medical community. Moreover, Han Yunshi's birth mother, Lady Tianxin, and Han Yunshi's mysterious birth father were both figures with great backgrounds in the medical community. If the Han family could use Han Yunshi to form connections in the future, it would be even more incredible. For the sake of the Han family's future, Han Kongin was willing to sacrifice everything. After Madame Su left, Murong Wanru slowly rose from Grand Concubine Yi's arms and said in a low voice, "Mu Fei, Wanru has lost face for you." "What are you saying?" "You have the heart to protect Mu Fei, which means you're the bravest." Grand Concubine Yi was very serious. She wasn't blind, but perhaps she trusted Murong Wanru too much to see through her. Murong Wanru's face was modest as she said, "Mu Fei, now that the truth has come to light, it's time to return sister-in-law's innocence. It's even more important to return Mu Fei's innocence. It's really unlucky to incur such infamy for no reason. TSK TSK TSK. Murong Wanru, that white lotus bitch, could still say such things now. Han Yunshi was truly angry as she mocked, "What, little sister Wanru isn't pleading for leniency for the Han family anymore. You know how to empathize with me and Mu Fei now. Sister-in-law, I was giving you face at first, but I never thought that Madame Su would be so impudent. How could I still plead for leniency for her?" Murong Wanru immediately retorted, her huff and puff. Those who didn't know better might really think she was disappointed in Madame Su. Grand Concubine Yi had been knitting her brows the entire time, so she didn't pay attention to Han Yunshi and Murong Wanru's conversation. Now that she did, she could tell that something was off. She blinked her eyes, as if pondering over something. "Little sister Wanru, don't get so worked up. I was just asking casually. This Madame Su really has guts. I don't know who gave her the gall to cause a ruckus in front of the Duke of Qin's estate. She should be regretting it now, right?" Han Yunshi said carelessly. Although it was useless, it was still a reminder to Grand Concubine Yi so she could go back and think over the strangeness of the situation. As expected, Grand Concubine Yi wasn't someone to be trifled with. I'm curious as well. She really does have guts." Hearing these words, Murong Wanru pursed her lips and inwardly rejoiced that she hadn't been exposed. She quickly changed the topic. "Mu Fei, there are still commoners waiting outside. You have to give an explanation for this matter." Grand Concubine Yi had thought it over for a long time before coming to a conclusion. She looked towards Han Kongin and said coldly, "Han Kongin, this matter arose because of your Han family. Since you've chosen Qin Wangfei, shouldn't you give those unruly commoners an explanation? Otherwise, Qin Wangfei wouldn't be able to handle the Han family storehouse key." Actually, Han Kongin wanted to do the same even without Grand Concubine Yi's request. He had long predicted that Han Yunshi accepting the storehouse key would cause a lot of misunderstandings and gossip. He wanted to find a chance to remind Han Yunshi, but now was also a good chance. He could use this chance to let Han Yunshi have the right to handle the storehouse key. That way, she wouldn't run into any trouble in the future when she interfered with the Han family affairs. Yes. This commoner obeys. Han Kongin was about to rise when third Madame Li pulled Han Ruoxue over. She called out plaintively, "Old master." Han Yunshi looked over and laughed in her heart. Li Mingmei, aw, Li Mingmei. You're really good at holding back. You waited until now to speak up. Although you have a quiet and indifferent personality, it's still too late to speak up now. Instead, it'll seem more deliberate. Just wait, your true face will be exposed very soon. Han Kongin looked over and sighed softly. Mingmei, this matter. Before Han Kongin could finish, Madame Li quickly bowed. Everything will be as old master says. Giving the storehouse key to esteemed Wang Fei is better than letting it fall into the hands of those uncles. This concubine understands. Back then, Han Kongin had taken this third Enyang in because firstly, third Enyang liked to read medical books and could get along well with him. Secondly, it was also because third Enyang was not weak, but had a temperament that stood aloof from worldly affairs. Her mother was very quiet, but Han Ruoshue's face was ashen white. She didn't want to go out at all. Official Ouyang, prepare the carriage. Grand Concubine Yi lazily rose to her feet, not sparing Han Kongin and the rest a glance as she walked past. Han Yunshi brought up the rear, shooting Han Kongin a grateful look before hurrying to catch up with Grand Concubine Yi. After so long, there were still plenty of people crowding around the justice courts. Right now, they were still talking amongst themselves. Most of the people who'd waited this long were busybodies who liked to gossip about others behind their backs. Of course, Mu Luiyue didn't leave either. She was filled with anticipation for the moment when Han Yunshi was brought out, her hands tied behind her back. As soon as Murong Wanru came out supporting Grand Concubine Yi, the crowd fell silent. When they saw Han Yunshi come out alone, they were stunned. Mu Luiyue's bright eyes narrowed, filled with suspicion. How could Han Yunshi still be fine? In a flash, the crowd was filled with suspicions. Judging from Qin Wangfei's appearance, it didn't seem like anything major had happened. What was the result? When third madam came out supporting Han Kongin, the crowd fell into an uproar. Mu Luiyue couldn't help but back up a step, knowing that something bad had happened. Where's Lady Su? Why did Divine Dr. Han come out personally? Heavens, I thought I'd never see Divine Dr. Han again. Where's seventh madam? And that young master? Just what's going on? What's he trying to do? Hearing the uproar, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't make out what the crowd was talking about, but she could tell that they were all questioning her. Although she maintained a dignified expression, her heart was filled with irritation. These were a bunch of uneducated, vulgar, and unruly people. If not for the fear of affecting her reputation, she'd never stand here and be the object of their discussion. She had already given the order to convict all of them and lock them up in the prison. After all, she was Tianing country's most respected and only grand concubine. She was also the Mufei of the most respected Duke of Qin and the only imperial uncle's Mufei. How could it be easy for ordinary people to see her? Grand Concubine Yi didn't want to stay a moment longer. She shot an unhappy look at official Ouyang, who immediately stepped forward and raised a hand to silence the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, after the trial, it's clear that Qin Wangfei coveted the Han family's assets and stole the storehouse key. It was all a fabrication and false accusation. Lady Su spread rumors and maliciously slandered her innocence. She gathered a crowd to cause a ruckus at the Duke of Qin's estate, not only damaging Qin Wangfei's reputation, but Grand Concubine Yi's as well. According to Tianing's laws, she's already been sentenced to death and will be beheaded after the new year. When official Ouyang's words reached this point, the entire place suddenly quieted down. It was so quiet that everyone could hear the sound of their breathing clearly. Heavens! How could this be? Madame Su actually framed Qin Wangfei and was sentenced to death. In a flash, the old women that Lady Su had brought along with her, as well as those who'd supported her, all grew fearful. Their legs turned to jelly as they held their breaths, afraid that they'd be discovered and implicated. Of course, it was impossible to say that no one had any suspicions. But who dared to openly raise them now? Grand Concubine Yi looked at the silent crowd before shooting Han Kongin a cold look. Official Ouyang quickly gave Han Kongin a shove from the shadows. Han Kongin sucked in a deep breath before standing up and declaring loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, this Han was the one who willingly gave the Han family storehouse key to Qin Wangfei and asked her to keep it safe for me. In the future, I'll help the elders of the clan elect a new head of house. Qin Wangfei's coveting of the Han family's assets is purely false. I hope that no one will presume to criticize my Han family's affairs today. I also warn those with ulterior motives not to sow discord between Qin Wangfei and my Han family." Chapter 133. Han Kongin's words were sonorous and forceful, his aura threatening. Although he was dressed in prison robes, he didn't lose the bearing of a head of house. His words dispelled everyone's suspicions. After all, Han Kongin's attitude didn't seem like he'd been forced, but very serious. As soon as Han Kongin finished speaking, official Ouyang hastened to add, "Esteemed imperial concubine was benevolent today and only punished Madame Su as a warning to others. She won't investigate the crimes of the others, so I hope that everyone will conduct themselves well. If anyone dares to carelessly criticize again, I won't let them off lightly." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. The crowd had all been scared witless and impulsive. Who knew things would turn out like this? Murong Wanru immediately shot looks at the crowd. Soon enough, several people took the lead in kneeling. "Esteemed imperial concubine is benevolent. We thank esteemed imperial concubine for not punishing us." As a result, the crowd all knelt down and shouted their thanks. It was a spectacular sight in front of the justice courts. Mu Luiyue was the only one who didn't kneel. She stood in a corner with a cold gaze, coldly examining Han Ruoxue. Of course, Han Ruoxue saw her, but it was only a glance before she immediately lowered her head. Seeing Han Ruoxue lower her head, Mu Luiyue grew even angrier. She'd always looked down on her foster daughter, Murong Wanru, and Lady Su, who was condescending to be a concubine. For the sake of delaying Han Yunxi's investigation, she didn't hesitate to cooperate with the two of them. She never expected to draw water with a bamboo basket. It was fine if they didn't do anything to Han Yunxi, but they even cleared her name and gave her a proper reason to get the key to the Han family storehouse. Seeing Han Yunxi standing high above in the limelight, how could she swallow this? Mu Liuyue's eyes narrowed, as if she was making a decision. At this moment, the displeased Grand Concubine Yi's expression finally improved at the sight of the kneeling crowd. Still, she was as haughty as ever as she swept a disdainful glance at the crowd. Without a word, she prepared to leave. Han Yunxi was also anxious to check on 7th concubine and little Yi-er situation. Just as she was about to turn and leave, Mu Luiyue suddenly walked out from the side and shouted loudly, "Qin Wangfei, I finally see you today. I thought you were afraid of losing and hiding." At these words, Grand Concubine Yi, Murong Wanru, and Han Yunxi all stopped at the same time to turn their heads. At the same time, the kneeling masses all looked towards the right in astonishment. He saw Mu Luiyue standing there gracefully. Among the kneeling crowd, she looked especially high and mighty. Mu Luiyue knew that if she exposed the bet today, it would affect her father and brother's investigation of the real murderer. But for the sake of toppling Han Yunxi, she was willing to risk everything. Today, with so many people here, she was going to let everyone know that she and Han Yunxi had a bet. 3 days later, she was going to fulfill her promise of stripping and parading through the streets. She was certain that Han Yunxi still hadn't found the culprit. If she did, she would have flaunted her prowess to her by now. How could she still be hiding? There were only 3 days left. She'd expose the truth now and let everyone know. In these 3 days, she had plenty of ways to cause more trouble and make her too busy to investigate. In any case, Han Yunxi was bound to lose this bet. Grand Concubine Yi glanced at Murong Wanru before a cold smile rose to her lips. She elegantly turned around and stopped in her tracks, not planning to leave. It looked like the curtains had fallen on the Han family's show, but Han Yunxi's wasn't over yet. One incident after another, Han Yunxi really didn't have good relations with people. Murong Wanru never expected Mu Luiyue to jump out now. This was great. She shot Mu Luiyue a meaningful look, indicating that she could make as much of a fuss as she wanted. She'd definitely help out well over the next 3 days so that Han Yunxi wouldn't have the time or energy to find the real culprit. Han Yunxi was the most surprised. She never expected Mu Luiyue to publicize the bet in public. After her shock, she angrily rebuked, "Mu Luiyue, have some sense of propriety. Is there a need to talk about our private matters in public? You should know the consequences are very bad." Han Yunxi had already spoken very bluntly. Once the matter of the bet was exposed, it had also exposed the fact that she'd helped the young general investigate the culprit behind the poisoning. This matter involved a northerly spy, and the Long Fei Yi had always wanted to keep it a secret. Had Mu Luiyue gone mad, or stupid? But in the face of Han Yunxi's blunt warning, Mu Luiyue didn't restrain herself, but grew even more aggressive. "Qin Wangfei, could it be that you're afraid of losing? Is that why you don't dare to publicize the matter? In 3 days, the date of the bet will be up. Since everyone's here today, including esteemed imperial concubine, it's better to publicize the matter so that everyone can be witnesses. Otherwise, you'll regret it later." "You!" Han Yunxi was truly infuriated. She glanced at Madame Li and her daughter out of the corner of her eye, only to see Han Ruoxue rejoicing in her misfortune. Madame Li was as calm as ever. If Madame Li knew about her bet with Mu Luiyue, how would she react? Seeing Han Yunxi refuse to answer directly, Mu Luiyue intensified her attacks, feigning curiosity as she asked, "Qin Wangfei, could it be that you don't dare? You're not prepared to renege on the bet, are you?" Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes, her entire being emanating a killing intent that kept people away. If it wasn't for the fact that everyone else was here, she'd really rush down and seal Mu Luiyue's mouth. This idiot. The suspect was right here, so what was she muttering about? "Sister-in-law, just what did you bet with Miss Luiyue? It's not something shameful, so tell us all." How could Murong Wanru remain silent at a time like this? "That's right, it's nothing shameful. Qin Wangfei, I'll tell you," Mu Luiyue pressed on. "Miss Luiyue, just what is it? Speak as you please. With me here, I won't allow anyone to act shamelessly." Grand Concubine Yi spoke up as well. Under everyone's gaze, Mu Luiyue felt a sense of accomplishment. As she walked over, the crowd automatically opened up a path for her. Lang looked at Mu Luiyue. Han Yunxi had no way to stop things from developing, so she might as well throw caution to the wind. In any case, this was the capital, Long Fei Ye's territory. It wouldn't be easy for Madame Li to escape. Before the tea leaves test results came out, she'd take this as a chance to sound out Madame Li and her daughter. Han Yunxi was looking forward to Madame Li's reaction. When Mu Luiyue reached the bottom of the steps, she couldn't hold back anymore. To reply Grand Concubine Yi, "Qin Wangfei and I made a bet to find the true culprit who poisoned the young general within a month. If she loses," Mu Luiyue gave Han Yunxi a provocative look before continuing. "If she loses, she'll take off her outer robes and run a lap around Xuanwu Street. 3 days from now will be the agreed date." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place was silent at first, but very quickly, it burst into an uproar. Heavens! This bet is too much. Who proposed this bet? isn't it too ruthless? TSK TSK TSK. I'm so looking forward to it. It had to be said that this bet was too shocking. Many people had forgotten what they were betting on. Han Yunxi's first reaction was to look towards Madame Li and her daughter, only to discover that Han Ruoxue was still rejoicing in their misfortune, while Madame Li was as calm and silent as ever. She didn't show any signs of shock or guilt. How could they be like this? At least give some reaction. Han Yunxi couldn't believe it. She couldn't help but wonder if she'd guessed wrong again. But in reality, Madame Li's heart was already in a state of upheaval. She assumed that Han Yunxi would be in trouble as soon as she returned and wouldn't have time to worry about Mu Qingwu's matters. Who knew that she'd make a comeback in just half a day? Who knew that Han Yunxi had a bet like this? There were only 3 days left to the bet, and the stakes were so high. With Han Yunxi's personality, how could she be willing to lose? If she didn't lose, then she had to win. This meant that Han Yunxi would be able to uncover the true culprit in 3 days. But who would she be able to uncover in 3 days? Last time, Han Yunxi and Long Fei had secretly investigated her courtyard without finding anything. Although they'd already suspected her, they had no evidence to back up their claims. Moreover, Han Yunxi had been kidnapped for the past few days. Where would she find the time to investigate the poison? Could it be that she already had some evidence in her hands? Was that why she dared to place such a high bet? Could it be that jar of tea leaves? Thinking of this, Madame Li became more and more uneasy. She had always been the most meticulous. Other than that jar of tea leaves, she didn't leave any evidence. Even if Han Yunxi suspected her, she couldn't do anything to her. But that jar of tea leaves, the more Madame Li thought about it, the more anxious she became. However, she had been hiding for so many years, so she was able to remain calm and collected. Soon, she comforted herself. No matter what, nothing had happened, so she shouldn't jump to a conclusion so quickly. Moreover, her method of poisoning was very tricky. Even if that jar of poisonous tea leaves fell into Han Yunxi's hands, Han Yunxi might not be able to find out the cause. One had to know that the poisonous tea leaves that she personally made, other than her master, there shouldn't be a second person in the world who could detoxify it. Madame Li mentally prepared herself in the shortest time possible. The expression on her face became more and more calm, without the slightest flaw. The more Han Yunxi looked, the more puzzled she felt. She couldn't admit that she'd guessed wrong, but Madame Li's reaction, just what was Long Fei doing now? Did it take that long to find a poison master to look at the report? Once they got the report, they'd have evidence to arrest the culprit. Han Yunxi, is Miss Luyue speaking the truth? Grand Concubine Yi's words silenced the noisy crowd and pulled Han Yunxi back to reality. Murong Wanru was close behind her. Sister-in-law, it can't be true, right? You went missing for a few days just to avoid this bet, right? Sister-in-law, although this bet is too much, a person has to keep their word. Han Yunxi was too caught up in her thoughts to see if her guess was correct that she'd forgotten about the stakes. Hearing Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru's echoes, she finally realized that things were far from good. These people were too abominable. Every single one of them had bad intentions and hit her while she was down. They were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. Han Yunxi was still fuming. She hadn't even replied to Grand Concubine Yi when an unexpected person spoke up as well. Big sis, I heard Miss Luyue talk about this bet long ago. You're not going to go back on your word now, are you? The speaker was none other than Han Ruoxue. Han Ruoxue. This was the suspect Han Yunxi had identified, the person who'd personally given the poison tea leaves to Mu Luyue. But she wasn't guilty at all, and was even helping Mu Luyue.